I want to know which paper did Archangel Gabriel show to Prophet Muhammad.
It was actually something written.
Brother, you asked a very good question.
That he said, I cannot.
Very special moment to you when that person accepts the shahada.
Do you want to accept Islam now?
Yes.
It's better to win over your opponent than to defeat him.
What do you mean win him over? Win him over?
So Quran says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ.
A terrorist organized bombing in Dhaka in Bangladesh.
Inspired the terrorist in Bangladesh to kill the 21 foreigners. The moment we went to file, the police threatened. So at that time, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, what he did at that time was the best. Son, what you have done in 4 years had taken me 40 years to accomplish, alhamdulillah. For a Dai, learning Arabic is very important. Very important. Is it a fard? No.
مساء الخير. ضيفنا الليلة الدكتور ذاكر نايك. هذه الحلقة مختلفة بالنسبة لنا لعدة أسباب. أولها طبعاً هو الحديث عن تاريخ وسيرة الدكتور ذاكر نايك. والسبب الآخر هو أنها تجربتنا الأولى في البودكاست باللغة الإنجليزية. مثل ما عودناكم بدون ورق يعتز بهويته العربية. احنا نفكر بالعربي، نتحاور بالعربي، ونسعى دائماً لتقديم المفيد لجمهورنا العربي. مع هذا كله رأينا أن تقديم هكذا محتوى ربما يضيف بعد آخر أو تجربة مختلفة لجمهورنا، ولهذا السبب تهمنا آراءكم وملاحظاتكم على هذه التجربة. وطبعا تقدرون تشاركونا انطباعاتكم عن طريق التعليقات في اليوتيوب أو عبر منصات التواصل المختلفة. وقبل لا نبدي ودي أشكركم على دعمكم المستمر لبدون ورق. هذا الدعم حافز لنا لتقديم الأفضل دائما. معكم فيصل العقل وأتمنى لكم متابعة ممتعة.
Sorry?
Yeah, 3 cameras, we're rolling. We've started the interview. Is this your first podcast interview or have you done a podcast interview?
I've done a few before.
Podcast, huh? Welcome to بدون ورق. You being our first interview that is conducted in English for us, it's an honor. We're happy to have you in Kuwait before anything else. So welcome to Kuwait, welcome to بدون ورق.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If we wanted to start from a specific place, we thought about the different areas we can start from, but if I wanted to start from a specific place, I would pick Bombay, specifically from 1965, from the 18th of October when you were born. And not as a Muslim here, as much as I would like to understand you as a child in Bombay, growing up in Bombay. How was it?
But natural, a child doesn't remember everything what has happened in the childhood. So that you have to ask to the parents to get a better answer as a child. Remember very few incidences of the school, etc.
Yeah.
So the main thing, of course, the memory doesn't allow you to remember everything as a normal human being. What we did when we were infants or when we were in the pre-primary, just a few instances. Of course, I studied in St. Peter's High School.
Yeah.
I lived in Mascon in Bombay, and I studied in the school that was a Protestant school, and that's where we grew up in the school. Though it was a Christian school, 80% of the students are Muslims over there.
So if I wanted to specify specifically in terms of what are the things did you used to play football when you were a kid? What were the things that you were interested in apart from school and apart from what did you like to watch movies? What did you like to do?
As far as the kid of sports is concerned, we were involved in most of the sports that was played in the school, except for cricket. I never liked cricket. I thought it was a waste of time. But of course, we were involved in hockey. We used to play football. We were there into sports.
Yeah.
And the games we used to play, different badminton, table tennis, indoor games, and swimming. All was part and parcel, horse riding.
But cricket, you said it's a waste of time, specifically.
Yes, that's the waste of time. Because, at our time, when we were in school, the cricket was for 5 days, one match. 5 days, and everything depends upon the weather and etc. So you spend 5 days on the television. Each day maybe 10 hours, a little bit less or more. So and then you get the results after 5 days for a test match. Whereas in a football, you get the result 1.5 to 2 hours. It's fast, but more exercise for everyone.
Yeah.
In cricket is different. Then they came up with the 1-day test match, then 50 overs, then 20 overs. But yet, it's nothing compared to football. We get more exercise. Football or the other games like hockey.
Yeah. What took our attention really when we were doing our research was that you were a stammerer, an extreme stammerer, how you described yourself in one of your talks. And I would like to understand that type of person in general, socially, talking to people. How were you, you being a stammerer, how did you conduct your conversations in general? Before we got to Da'wah, how did you...
Since the time I remember,
Yeah.
since the time I can remember, I was a stammerer since childhood. Since the time I can remember, I used to always stammer when I was a childhood. And anyone asked, what's your name? I said, my name is د.ذاكر. And I remember while stammering, I have to even jump many times. So if I jump, the lock opens up. So د.ذاكر. So it was many times I remember when I used to stand below the doorknob. And if I'm saying my name, ذاكر, or answering, and when I jump, I get a bang on the head. So that happened quite a few times. So I was a stammerer which was on a high level. So much so that in school, there was a subject called as public speaking, where the teacher used to give me PF. PF means pass-fail, since you asked me about the school. So there's a grading, A, B, C, D. And then after that is just pass, and one is pass-fail.
Mm-hmm.
Pass-fail means on the borderline, and that was mainly due to maybe out of pity.
Miskin.
Miskin, yeah. Miskin is, yes, needy and weak, but out of pity they say pass-fail. So I remember since, from the low grade to up to high grade also, whenever this subject was there, public speaking has to get pass-fail.
But you were really good in mathematics in school.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Yes,
What was it about mathematics that attracted you and you were able to excel in mathematics?
I was good with numbers, and that was my favorite subject, mathematics. And one thing in mathematics is crystal clear, right or wrong. There's nothing gray area. So mathematics is something which is crystal clear. So I like that subject. And the answer is accurate. There's nothing like, right or wrong. There's nothing like doubtful. And so therefore I was good in mathematics and with numbers and with calculations. Without the computer I could get or without the calculator, sorry. At that time, computers weren't there at the time in school. And I was good with maths, and in that subject, most of the time I used to get the award for mathematics. I used to get the prize.
Logic. It was a lot of logic in
Yes,
mathematics.
yes.
Okay, so after high school, you decided to pick medicine. What was the reason behind? You had so much you can pick. You were doing well, exceptionally well in school. You had high grades, but you decided to pick medicine. What was the reason behind picking medicine?
Number one, the main reason was at that time I thought that being a doctor is the best profession where you can serve humanity.
You thought?
Yes, I thought it was the best profession. Now it's different. Now I feel differently. At that time, I thought medicine was the best profession where you could help human beings as a whole, number one. Number two, because my father was a doctor, my parents, especially my mother, she wanted me to become a heart specialist. And number three, at my time, and even today to a great extent, the best profession in the world at that time, even now to a great extent, it is being a medical doctor. But the main reason was to serve humanity. Then secondly, my parents also wanted the same. And third, the most highly sought profession, or people craved to become a doctor because that was difficult and the marks required were the highest.
So that brings me to a question where your relationship with your father, rahmatullah alayh, he was an inspiration for you in a way, for you to become a medical doctor.
Yes.
What was your relationship in general with your father? Was it a close relationship? Did you did he just inspire you on a career level, or did you look up to him in general?
My father was a very busy person. Besides being a medical doctor, he was also a person who was involved in social activities. And he had many social friends, so he was extremely busy, but he gave time to us late in the night, etc. So he did give us time. So because of that, and he was very charitable, though he came from a very poor family. He didn't have money to pay the fees of his medical studies. So he used to, in the morning, deliver milk and earn a small amount. He used to deliver newspaper. And I'm proud that my father was so poor, and yet, mashallah, he used to, so much so that he could not do post-graduation initially because of lack of funds to pay the fees. So he did the post-graduation later on. He was a psychiatrist. Yeah. And he became the first Muslim psychiatrist who was the president of all over India Psychiatry Association. So, but even though he passed his MBBS, even though he was poor, he always was very charitable. And then Allah, mashallah, blessed him, and his medical practice became booming. And whenever though he earned a lot of, mashallah, we had no problems after he became popular. He used to always give free medicines to the poor, help the poor. And he was involved in many social activities. He was involved in, in laying foundations for schools, for colleges, for orphanages. He had his own charitable organization, and he was involved in umpteen. If you ask me the number, I cannot tell you. Umpteen number of charitable organizations, either as president, as chairman, as secretary general, or as a board member, into various charitable organizations. So he was more of a social person, so much so that he had contacts in most of the countries in the world. So when in our youth we used to travel to any country, he had some friend there, whether it be America, any part of the world. We traveled, touring the country, he had his contacts. So he was very well connected. And he became very popular. He was very well known. Like in Dr. Abdul Karim Naik, means people know. So, so I was known around as the son of Dr. Abdul Karim Naik.
So you were referred to as the son of Dr. Abdul Karim Naik?
Yes, that's it. And of course, later on, when I started doing Dawah, etc., so he said, you see, now you were referred to as the son of Dr. Zakir, and now I'm referred to as the father of Dr. Zakir. So that should come later on in life, but just in case that thing doesn't crop up.
Yeah, but I think what really, what I come to this point, and I think it's a very important point, and you also mentioned this point from a previous lecture for you that I saw, is that your parents never forced Islam on you in terms of, they never told you you have to do it.
As far as Islam is concerned, alhamdulillah, both my parents were practicing, but they never forced at all, which I don't agree with them.
You don't agree?
I don't agree with them.
And
knowing the Islamic rules and all.
Yeah.
They didn't force at all. Didn't force, and of course they told you pray it's better. I feel they didn't tell that also. I don't remember. But they prayed 5 times.
Yeah.
They prayed 5 times a day. MashaAllah, they were practicing Muslims. They fasted very well. But so much so that I remember that the first time I fasted the full month was in 2nd standard, which wasn't a requirement. I think it was 7 years or 8 years between that. 7
You
years.
just wanted to do it?
Yes. So the first time I kept the full fast. I remember the first time I fasted, maybe I was in nursery. I don't know, maybe 3 years or 4 years. The first fast, a single day. I don't remember, maybe 3 years, 4 years. I don't remember. But I remember the first time I completed the full month of Ramadan, I was the only student in the full class that fasted the full month in 2nd standard, where I was, I think, 7 years or less than 7 years.
So that brings me to the point that your parents led by example. They
Yes.
taught you Islam by example, but from a totally different school.
Yes. They never projected themselves as being, very practicing Muslim, and they never forced anything. But they were good Muslims, of course, and honesty in their dealings, everything. So more of a practice, which is good.
Yeah.
But they never told me to pray. And I remember in the 2nd, 3rd standard, we used to pray twice a day, thrice a day. I remember one of the friends of my mother, when I went to, I think when I was in the 6th standard or 7th standard, when I was about 13 or 14 years, you could say, at the right time when I became an adult. A man becomes an adult at 13, 14. So she told me, do you pray? I said, yes, I pray 3 times, sometimes 4 times, sometimes twice. So she said, son, she was my mother's friend, she was an elderly lady. She said, I'll give you an advice. That when you pray, when you finish your prayer, suppose you pray your salah, pray to Allah that, suppose you're praying Zohar, pray to Allah you don't miss your Asr. In the Asr salah you pray that you don't miss your Maghrib. In the Maghrib you pray that you don't miss your Isha. Isha you pray, that's it. Do it for 40 days only. That's my advice. I said, okay, no harm. So I did 40 days and then that became
The habit.
my habit. So never did we miss, rarely remember that we missed any of the Fard Salah.
I want to connect the points where growing up in India as a Muslim before, and I want to come towards our end of the conversation of Islam today in India. But growing up in the 60s and 70s in India as a Muslim and in Bombay at the time, how was it in general?
Of course, we didn't find any difficulty, any problem at that time in the late 60s. And everything was fine. There was no communal disharmony at that time. And since we went to a school which was a Christian managed school, Protestant school, but since most of the students were Muslims, it was a co-ed school where I went to. But of course, by nature, not because of Islam, by nature I had to sit away from the girls. though they were allowed, but I always sat separately by nature. So it wasn't because of Islam, but by nature I had to keep myself aloof from the ladies, and I had only boys who were friends. Not because of Islam, that was my nature. So,
but your nature, and here I'm going to ask you a little bit more of an intimate question, if you allow me, please. Was it because you were a stammer and you were shy, or was it because your nature didn't like to speak?
No. I just felt that a gent should not mix. I didn't like a boy having a girlfriend and a girl having a boyfriend.
You just didn't accept the nature of it.
That's it. I wouldn't say it's because of Islam. I knew Islam was that. I was aware of Islam. I was an average Muslim. But it wasn't because I wanted to follow. It was just a nature. So I was away from this. Maybe just how are you follow thing. Never used to shake hand with the girls. So this is a boy who's, so it was common. It wasn't very common at my time. But it was known that shaking hand with a friend, there's no problem. Anyway, maximum, hello, how are you? That's it. So I was aloof. I was away from the opposite sex, even in my college days.
In 1987, you were 22 years old, specifically in October 1987, and I'm sure you know which point I'm about to raise. And you were a student of medicine at the time, and you said that, or this was a turning point in your life.
Correct.
What happened in 1987 that it was the turning point in Sheikh Ahmed Naik's life?
In 1987, in December, my father told me that there's a person, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, has come to Bombay. And he's staying at my friend's place. Let's go and meet. Who? Ahmed Deedat.
You didn't know Ahmed Deedat?
I knew him, but I'd seen maybe one of his videos. Rarely, not really. Okay, there's maybe one video for half an hour here and there I'd seen. And my brother said, you should come. So just for the sake of my father, they called me. I went along with my brother at the house of my father's friend. And then I saw this person, mashallah, massive person with a white beard, and
How was his charisma when you first saw him?
He was, mashallah, he was an elderly person but looked young and well built and a tall person. So that time my elder brother, Dr. Muhammad Naik, he is 5 years elder to me. That time I was involved in many activities in the colleges. He was the Secretary General of the Students' Union. So he was a very good speaker, my brother. Very good speaker, very eloquent in English, knew how to. So he requested Sheikh Ahmed, can you give a talk tomorrow? And we met him in the night.
Okay.
And his flight was tomorrow night. So he said, I'm flying tomorrow. I said, no problem, we'll keep it in the evening. After Asr or after Maghrib. So Sheikh Deedat said, you have less than 24 hours. Now it's night time. How will you do publicity? So we are talking late in the night at 10, 11 o'clock. You cannot give ads in the newspapers because in newspapers they have to give it, in the evening so that it can come in the newspaper. There was no social media. So my brother requested and my father insisted, okay, why don't you? He said, okay, fine, no problem. He agreed. And that time I was just a follower of my, of my brother and ready to assist. So my elder brother was the main person who was in the front, and I was just, like a younger brother behind him, following that way. I was
support.
So yeah, fully. I was the full, I was the backbone, but he was the main person who was there. So my father, being, as I told you, very popular. My father started making phone calls in the morning, and he booked the hall in one of the engineering colleges of the Muslims. And my father was a board member of one of the largest Muslim institutes of India. The second large, Anjuman Islam.
MashaAllah.
So since he was a board member and one of the most popular person there, so it's so easy for him to book the hall, which had a capacity of 1,000 people only. At that time, 1,000 was great. Okay. So then we organized a talk and they gave the hall complimentary, and my father started making phone calls. And because of the contacts of my father, that time in 1987, in December, we got the creme de la creme of the Muslim audience. We got the big billionaires of the Muslims, we got film actors, top people. 1,000 people, but all top of the...
Do you remember specific names?
Yes, I can take the name. Allana was there, then there were many actors were there, Mukhri was there, and many people.
So it wasn't just a normal event, it was for above his expectations.
Because Sheikh Deedat, we did not know we could collect 1,000 was okay, but collecting creme de la creme was alhamdulillah. So because, of course, he was known, but we didn't know he was that well known. So collecting 1,000 people, Sheikh Deedat was impressed. Who are these two young men? And I was a photographer. I'm very good at photography. I was a photographer. I was a chauffeur. So, I was taking care of him personally. So it was a very good event, very well organized. And they said, oh, very good. The microphone system is good. And he was very happy. He said, I've traveled so many parts, but in less than 24 hours, such audience and such a crowd. He was very happy, and from there he went to the airport directly because, And the event talk was, I remember, the Islam and other religions. And it was a talk where he won comparative religion. And there was a question and answer session, and he was very happy with it. Later on, when we started organizing the program, we were feeling ashamed what a bad job we did.
Comparing to what he did the first time.
Comparing to what we did afterwards, he said, and Sheikh Deedat was very happy. He was impressed. He said, what you have done is, sound system is so good. We said, so horrible sound system for Sheikh Deedat. And he was thinking it's a very good system. When we learned about technology and of the cameras, we thought, we realized, we were fools at that time. But then he was very happy that who are these two youngsters, at such a short time in Bombay, without publicity, without any media, they got 1,000 people came to Lakram and Kala. So he agreed to come after 6 months to India again. And that time he came for approximately 3 weeks, 18 days to 3 weeks. And in the short span we had, I think 18, we were there for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And in approximately maybe 13 or 14 days of his stay in Bombay, we had 18 lectures, mashallah. Then we went 2 days to
You were his
Bangalore.
chauffeur and he stayed in your house.
Yes, when he came the second time, he stayed with us. The first time he was staying. Second day, he stayed in a house and we found that he was very humble.
How?
Very humble. He was ready to sleep. And, I remember Sheikh Deedat, So we gave my parents' room to him. Of course, then we all shifted to another room. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. We were not. So 2-bedroom apartment in Bombay is also good. So he and his son, Yusuf Deedat, that's his son. They came and they gifted us the full set of video cassettes to us, his video cassettes.
That's the first time you had his full video set?
Full, yes. Of course, when he left, I saw many of his videos. They were available. So I saw many of his videos before he came. And when he came the second time, I was his fan.
Okay.
The first time when I met, I was okay. He's known, some known person,
Yeah.
But the second time when I met him in 1988, that time I was his hardcore fan. Okay. I saw many of his videos and maybe I had about 20, 30 videos. I had multiple times. So in that span of 6 months, I saw many of his tapes and memorized many of his talks in the short span of 6 months.
Before we come to the 6 months, so during the 10 to 14 days when he was...
in the second trip.
Yeah.
In the first trip, he was for only 1 day in Bombay. He was passing by.
Okay. The second trip, he stayed in your house?
He stayed in the house
And
for about 14 days and 2 days he went to Bangalore.
And he slept on the floor, I remember you said once.
Yes, the bed was there. He said, I prefer sleeping on something hard, and he slept on the floor also. So he was so humble.
Yes.
And I remember that he wanted breakfast at one particular time. And my mother wanted to be, extra, making some good breakfast. So it was delayed by about 15 minutes. He said, I want breakfast on time. I don't mind anything. I want not die. So you could see that he got so angry. And my mother was making all delicacies and all. She was more interested, like a normal lady, wanting to give the best. But we saw that he was very humble.
Yes.
But natural, because when he came second time, we hadn't publicity. So we had to have security outside the house, security below the building.
Oh, there was security, huh?
Yes, because
he was how popular was he?
Yes, because, of course, he was popular. Yeah. But because the publicity, because my brother was well-versed. So when he came the second time, we had booked the largest halls of Bombay. We had done publicity. Everything was free. So, and we did everything because of contacts. We got many things, complimentary, whatever. Anyway, so I remember that Sheikh Deedat thought that we spent a big amount. Of course, Sheikh Deedat didn't charge for the ticket. We didn't know all the protocol. He came with his own ticket.
Yeah.
And we had the good halls, we had breakfast, everything else. So he thought maybe we spent a lot of money. But then actually, we did 18 talks and we spent approximately somewhere close to 80,000 rupees. 80,000 rupees in terms of riyals would be somewhere close to maybe 6, and in terms of maybe 500 dinars.
So it's about $1,500.
500 in dollars.
What, 1,650?
That time dollar rate is different. Now the dollar rate is different. Okay. If you count today's dollar rate, 80,000 would be somewhere close to maybe $1,000.
Okay.
$1,000 okay. Of today's rate. At that time's rate, it may be $2,000.
But that's a lot of money. So your dad took care of that, I'm guessing.
No, that's nothing. Of course, my dad, every 100%. So we didn't take donation from anyone.
Yeah, I get it. But $2,000 at the time wasn't it something that
nothing.
is no?
It was, but nothing.
Okay.
Not doing so many events, impossible.
Okay. Fair
It was
enough.
mainly because of the context.
For the context.
And 2-3 years later, when we were doing programs, for one program, we're spending 10 times more than what we're spending.
So maybe because we're missing one piece of information here. Is your dad, once he graduated, he was from a humble background. When he graduated, and then he started to be specializing, he started making good amounts of money, right?
Yes, Allah blessed us.
Alhamdulillah. So
His profession, his medical practice was very good. So we were well off.
So in that sense,
At
this
that
is
time
why,
when he came, he was well off.
So that's why you were able to afford all of these.
Funded it. Because my father was very charitable, so we didn't take a single rupee or penny from anyone.
Okay.
And we had, my father, that is organized, but we did individually. So we were not bothered about name. My father or my brother, or we never mentioned this organized by us. Deedat, who's the organizer?
Nice.
You know, and I remember that we had kept some VIP cards. So we were very particular about time and, you know, what to follow. And that time, of course, a little bit Islam was there. So, yeah. So we had kept maybe the auditorium was 1,000 capacity, which is too much. You know, most of the auditorium was 600, 700. So we used to have people on the floor. So whatever was capacity, double used to come. And that time was too much. So we used to keep maybe 50 chairs booked. And I'm a man of words then, you know. So 50 VIP time, you say there, you have to come 10 minutes before the program starts. If you come late, then the ticket is invalid. So we were very strict. So we gave complimentary to VIPs and all. And many times, you know, all these top people from the film industry. And my father knew many. So, you know, they came late. And I was like a person like following, who are you? So I remember Naushad, the music director. He came and, you know, I was following my rules. Khalas, you are late. You cannot sit in the first car. Of course, then people didn't do that. So many times we broke the rules of that. But of course, they were VIP. So we remember how I was strict with my principles, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember how we had gone with Sheikh Deedat to his house, Naushad's house. And he had a friend who was the editor of Blitz. And his wife was a Christian.
Okay.
So how he did dawah there. So it was a good experience that staying with him for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then he was for a couple of days in Bangalore.
But you learned a lot from him personally just by being his chauffeur and being...
Of course. The main thing as far as the matter is concerned is from his videos, to be frank. I mean, though people call me that I'm a student of Sheikh Deedat, and that's an honor for me. But technically, I haven't been taught by him, technically. But practically, yes, I learned from his videos. And today we have online course, so that way I'm a student.
Okay.
But in the olden days, student music, have to sit with him, you know, and there was no online in the late 80s or the early 90s. Student music, have to sit with him and study with him for a few years or whatever. So I have not sat with him. Yes, I learned about other things about, not, the matter is from the video.
Okay. The content.
Content is from the video, but the way he carried himself and in nature, all that was one-to-one. Of course, I met him many times. He came to India the second time, that's it. But I went to South Africa, met him many times.
Yeah.
I met him in Saudi Arabia, the other countries. I learned a lot from him. I met him many times. But this experience that he was so humble, so popular, and of course, now when we see the duas now, okay, you have to give me a business class, then only I'll come. You have to give me in a 5-star hotel. And Sheikh Deedat that time was number one in the world. No one close to him. At that time in 1988, of course. And nothing asking, everything he's paying himself, you know. And he was very happy with that. And we realized that, you know, now when we compare ourselves, when we call the other speakers and when we do conference, the largest conference in the world we are doing, and what we are spending, of course, we thought that, you know, that we were fools at that time.
Yeah.
But he saw in us these two young brothers, mashallah, what they have done, others don't do. So that's what impressed him and he came immediately. Otherwise, he's booked for many years. So he agreed to come the next, and then he said that why don't you come for the Dawah training program? In that 1988, there was a program after a few years.
Yeah.
So I said, I have my medical college, I can't leave. I was in the third year when he came the next time. And when he came in the mid-88, it was August or September, he said, you know, we are going to choose 20 students, but I can give you a seat and all. He was impressed with me. I said, I'll try. And I could not. Of course I could not, because I'm in the medical college and I could not leave for a 2 months course. So I wanted to go, but I could not, and I missed it. So
What did you do?
No, I didn't go there.
I know. So what did you do for not going? So you just stayed. He's in South Africa. You just continued medicine.
I have to continue. Well, medicine was there.
Okay.
But then, of course, after meeting him, it increased. I got more number of video cassettes.
Yeah.
I used to do dawah in the medical college. And the medical college, the percentage of Muslims were hardly 3%, 4%. In population, we were 15 to 20%. In the medical college, 3 or 4%. That's it. And there were hardly any Muslim friends. So when I asked to do dawah in the medical college, my Muslim friends used to, you know, run away. That being with Zakir, we'll get beaten up. So they run away and I has to be alone there, trying to use the techniques of Sheikh Deedat. And then that time Sheikh Deedat, when I met him the next time, I think in 88,
You went to South Africa.
I went to South Africa. In 88, I went to South Africa during the holidays.
Do you remember the first time you gave da'wah? Your first time you tried to do da'wah? Or
First time, the incident was, I remember that in a building, the name of the building where I stayed was Rosary House. Rosary means a tasbih, a subah.
okay.
So Rosary in English means tasbih. It was a Christian building where majority Christians were there. There were only 3 Muslims. Out of the apartments, 32 plus 14, there were 46 apartments. Out of 46 apartments, only 3 were Muslims and 3-4 were non-Christians. More than 30-35 were Christians. So it was a Christian building.
Okay.
So my dawah started in the building.
In that building
In that building itself, and I remember there were 2 other Muslim families at that time. After, of course, the majority became Muslim in the building later on. So I remember doing dawah there with my friends who were in my class. And I remember they saying, Zakir, you're winning because you're very good in speaking. And my friend's name was Vivek. And I told Vivek, you're telling me this? You're my classmate. I stammer? And you're telling I'm good in speaking? So he was shocked. Like, when a person loses the debate, he gives excuses.
Yes.
And I remember that when I started speaking to non-Muslims, my stammering vanished.
Vanished, absolutely.
Absolutely. I was very fluent. The moment I start talking to a Muslim, it comes back. So it was like a miracle that when I'm speaking to the non-Muslims, whether Hindu or Christian, my stammering absolutely vanished. Zero. Immediately, after 2 minutes, I come back and speak to Muslim again, I start stammering,
Wow.
with jumping and with, and my stammering was excessive. It wasn't lower or moderate, it was excessive stammering. And it was very evident. So when Sheikh Deedat gave that video cassettes, we thought that, we have to now start doing dawah. So we thought of giving it to a video cassette library which rented movies, Hindi movies and English movies, which is haram. So we gave to the Shazia library and he agreed that if you give me the original set, I will give you 2 copies on TDK, Japanese. So our deal was fine. We wanted it, but we wanted to have a copy. So we gave him a full original set.
Yeah.
In return, he gave us 2 on Japanese tape.
Okay.
So one we kept it as a library for other people to take it from home, and one we kept it as a safety, the masters.
Fair
Our
enough.
backup master. That's what it's called.
That's what we do for our podcast as well. We keep our masters.
No,
Okay.
we keep 6 or 7 in different countries.
In
So we
different
do
countries,
backups,
huh?
yes, different countries.
I know you keep in 2 offices, not different countries.
That's in the city where we stay 2 offices, but we keep at least in 5 or 6 different countries.
Wow. Okay.
And so, because we feel it's valuable for us.
It is. Yeah.
So I remember that time, and that person, of course, he was a Muslim and he didn't intend to make any money.
Yeah.
Fortunately, unfortunately, people weren't happy with the service. Why I'm saying fortunate, unfortunately, if the service was good, then maybe we wouldn't have started an organization. So because the service wasn't good, people complained, and I said, okay, he's giving free, he's not a man, so why are you complaining? Anyway, they used to complain. Then we decided to start a video cassette library, Islamic video cassette library, and the main speaker would be Sheikh Deedat.
Okay.
So at that time we had maybe, I'm talking about a couple of years later, of course. So we had gifted, I remember, I think it was close to 87 videos of us when we gave. And then, of course, when I kept on traveling in different parts of the world, my passion was to collect any and all of Islamic video cassettes and books. So when we traveled, we saw to it that any Islamic cassette, good, bad, ugly, we used to purchase.
Okay.
Any Islamic book, we used to purchase.
But what made you now you've more or less started doing da'wah, practicing it. You were you were still a medical student at the time, correct?
Yes.
So you were still a medical student at the time. You're still doing da'wah, and then what was the reason behind you pursuing that path? What was it? Was it personal? Was it, again, I'm going to bring you back to being a stammer, and when you preach or when you talk about Islam to non-Muslims, you don't stammer, it's vanished. So was that part of it? What kept you going?
The thing that kept me going, when I convinced them, I felt happy. MashaAllah, the person is a mushrik and he's accepting Islam. And accepting Islam came later, accepting my arguments. And that time, tell you frankly, before meeting Sheikh Deedat, I was an average Muslim. Praying 5 times a day, mashallah, fasting in the month of Ramadan, as the average Muslim, I would call. But there was no passion of dawah until I met Sheikh Deedat. Good practicing Muslim, keeping the fast, everything, and praying. But after meeting Sheikh Deedat, the passion of dawah, conveying the message came. And that's how I started speaking to my friends, to my colleagues in the medical college. My initial people who I did dawah with or did experiments with were my, first were my classmates, then my colleagues in college, and in my building. My building was surrounded by non-Muslim faculty Christians. My college mainly with Hindus. So that time, Sheikh Deedat, when I met him again, when I went back to South Africa in 88, I went in 2000, I went a few times.
Yeah.
He told me, son, why don't you study Hinduism?
You have to study Hinduism now.
Because he was specialized with the Christians and Jews.
Okay.
So Sheikh Deedat was a specialist. He was known as the Muslim scholar of the Christian Bible. That was the title he got. So he was specialized mainly in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. That's his specialty. But he had given a talk on Hinduism.
Yeah.
From ignorance to Hinduism. And if you heard that talk, it was very good, but it was very volatile. If we played that cassette in Bombay, there would have been riots.
Volatile as in?
Matter, content. And he made statements like, the Hindu gods are blue color. Have you seen a blue film? Have you seen blue film pornography? So he used to say things which may be true, but it cannot go down the throat of a non-Muslim. So I felt it very offensive. Not that what he said was wrong, but we felt that if we use this in Bombay, there will be riots. It wasn't at all. So that cassette we didn't keep for public to view. Only one tape of Deedat we didn't keep in the video library was on Hinduism and Islam. I took it out, it wasn't there. People used to ask, some we knew, then slowly used to give it, but it was not there available for
everyone.
For everyone.
It was very aggressive.
Very volatile. Aggressive means it was like, if anyone says something against the Prophet, what will happen? So against the God he's saying.
Same thing.
Imagine.
Yeah.
What he's saying is a fact. But a fact can be said in various ways. So I didn't say it's wrong, but I said it will not go down the throat of the Indians.
That brings me to a very, very important point. And then, and when, in general, when you try to debate, you've engaged in a lot of debating, and for you to be considerate of the other people's belief to be able to bring them closer, what are the main things that you think about when you debate other people, especially from other religions, not to offend them, but to kind of show them the way that you're trying to show them?
To tell you frankly, when we saw only Sheikh Deedat initially for the first couple of years. It was Sheikh Deedat and nothing else in the first couple of years, maybe 88, 89. So whatever Sheikh Deedat said, we repeated blindly. Blindly. And they called me like Deedat. Everyone called me Deedat. And in fact, I was more aggressive than Sheikh Deedat. More aggressive. Yes.
Younger.
And I remember when the first time, not the first time, when Sheikh Deedat came in 88, I got more close to him. I was the chauffeur. I told him, uncle, why are you so aggressive? Asked him. Maybe 2-3 days I spent with him and asked him. So he said, son, of course you could have easily shunned me down and, replied and, given me a slap, anything. But son, I'm not aggressive, I'm militant. His reply was?
Militant.
I'm not I'm militant. When you fight the devil, there are two ways you can fight. Either with fire or with holy water. I chose the fire. You want to choose holy water, go ahead, who's stopping you? So I was impressed with his answer. So I said, okay, let's try and use the holy water. So initially, this part I didn't tell earlier, the early part. That's in 88. So that time when it was Dawah. So in 1988, when I met him for the second time when he came to Bombay, and we told this, I'm a Pathan, he used to say. He's not a Pathan, but he used to say that, and he was, mashallah, 6.3 something in height.
Yeah.
He was tall and massive built. He said, so do the job. If you can do it better than me and show it to me. He said, okay, do better, show it to me. Do the job, don't just talk. You're direct. So then believe me, when he left in 1988, I did Dawah for many months with his matter being soft. And I got no results.
No results?
No, this is after 88.
Yeah, no results.
Very little. No results, you could say, compared to what I got afterwards.
Yeah.
So I did Dawah, but okay.
Insignificant.
Same thing, but low tone, very soft. Matter is same. So you can say the same matter in different ways, being militant, being soft, being average. So I was very humble, but no results. No results or very little, negligible results. I said, what is the problem? I'm saying the same thing what Deedat is saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying with more hikmah, more husna. Of a little bit Quran we learned. So he said, okay. So I should get better result, but no result, believe me. No negligible result.
Yeah.
Okay, I said, let's try Sheikh Deedat style. So after many months in the medical college, in my building, which was my main field, my battlefield,
Yeah.
I started becoming aggressive. More like Deedat. Copying him ditto. So first I copied his matter, but not his tone, not his style. Same matter. And my memory was good, mashallah. So then same thing with the same tone, copying everything. To extent becoming more. And I saw results. Then I became more harsh. More militant, we want to call it. Or more aggressive. And I got better results. So khalas, so then you could see me, khalas, going and...
Your style.
Then copying Deedat and going beyond what he's saying,
Yeah.
beyond.
Risky.
It is not wrong, it's not haram because Allah gives you permission. So therefore I tell people, see, what Deedat did is not haram. He's not breaking any rule. You're not doing dawah, you're breaking the rule.
Yeah, but at the same time, you mentioned at the beginning that there were some tapes for Sheikh Ahmed Deedat that if you were able to show them.
Oh, it would create rats.
Yeah, so how were you able to become more aggressive but be also considerate at the same time?
No, this is a different thing. One thing you have to realize that in India, when we speak about Christianity, it's very safe. Because Christians don't have power in India.
Okay.
So in Christianity, we had no problem. So using his matter for Christianity, even if they felt insulted, the majority were Hindus. Then were the Muslims. Hindus actually less, but counting with the Dalits, they claim to be 80%.
Yeah.
Claimed they are lesser than that. Muslims, the government said 14.3%. We consider 20%. Christians were 3%. So that way, so as far as India is concerned, we had no problem of Christianity. But Hinduism, they claim to be 80%. We say something, there'll be riots.
Yes.
So we didn't have to be diplomatic with the Hindus, to be frank. Sorry,
With the Christians.
with the Christians, to be frank. There were minorities, so no problem. We were in a Christian school, but no problem. So it was easy to copy him. And he spoke only on one tape that I know of on Hinduism.
Okay.
When he spoke about other religions, he used to speak about Christianity and Judaism and Islam. Hinduism was not touched. In one or two lectures, one lecture fully given Hinduism, which was very volatile. So when I started emulating Sheikh Deedat the way he did, I got results. Then I became more aggressive. To extend that, my sister, who was you could say my main guinea pig or my punching bag, she was also involved in dawah. She was my sister, the Naila Nurani, approximately 3 years older to me.
Yeah.
My elder sister. So we are 5 in a family. We have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So she was like my guinea pig. Anything new? Okay. Attacked with her, and then she used to reply, she used to counter, and like she used to play the devil's advocate, whatever it is.
Okay.
So she was my guinea pig,
You trained with her.
Yes, I have to punch with her, and so of course, so then she said, oh, you're too aggressive. So I became more aggressive, but I got results. And then people started knowing me. At that time also, the more I did dawah, my stammering with the Muslims kept on reducing. With non-Muslims, it never happened.
Okay.
The more I got involved, after 1 or 2 years, my stammering with Muslims reduced. And that was still 1991 when we started our own organization, Islamic Research Foundation. Previously, when Sheikh Deedat left, we printed books in the name of my father's organization, Rahmani Foundation. So we printed books and we gave ad in the paper, many on books. Okay. So we printed approximately 17 books and divided into 5 sets. 17 books and about few pamphlets. So each set had 3 books and some pamphlets, So we had 4 sets, 5 sets. Okay, don't give everything together. It was printed by my father. We didn't take any money from outside.
From your dad.
From my dad. Not from my dad.
So it's 5,000 rupees a month.
No. It was 5 sets.
I mean, but you will get money from your dad, you said?
No, that is because you have heard my tape. That's
after.
That's after that.
Okay.
This is before the organization started.
Before the organization.
So because you heard my tape,
Yeah.
that is when I started the organization, asked my father, give me 5. That's afterwards.
That's just
This
after.
is before the IRF started. It was the Rahmani Foundation.
Okay.
So we printed books with the name of Rahmani Foundation. We had to write an organization name.
Yeah.
And we give ad. And then anyone wants, write to us, we used to give. So we said, okay, first read the first set. After it's 3 books, write to us again, we give. Because we felt, why should we give 17 books? Expensive
Yes.
booklet. So we used to give 3-4 books.
Little by little.
You read, ask for a second set, give. So I remember we used to print from the printers, not a very expensive printer. So when it used to come, I was very specific. Okay, here's the printer, so I have to sort out books into 4 categories. One category is perfect, one that bit printing is, So 4 categories. Some maybe the print it is out of print. Now of course we do it best of printers. They do the sorting. We don't. So I have to spend time sorting.
Yes.
Okay, 4 sets. This set to give to VIP hand delivery. Okay. Second set is non-VIP hand delivery. Third or fourth set by post. And of course we are going to meet them. So we had all my ways, and we used to. So I remember we used to give the books, and that's how we started the organization. And then we thought of making organizations especially for Dawah. This was Himani Foundation for social activities, helping the orphans and other various activities. But it wasn't for Dawah.
Before we speak about the foundation, Sheikh ذاكر, I would like to speak about when Sheikh Deedat asked you to learn Hindu, the religion of Hinduism. Did you learn Hinduism?
Yes, of course.
So you went and you took courses in Hinduism? Or how did you learn?
I just read books and I saw video cassettes, so mainly from books and video cassettes.
So it's very important to understand the person in front of you and how they think before you can actually debate them. So what I'm trying to get to is here about debating people and arguing. And you also mentioned before in a different interview or part of our research is that you were at this point in college, you are known for being a very good debater and you did argue very well.
Yes, in the school. From school time.
From
college,
school
of course, from school time.
So,
from school time, though as a stammerer, I could prove white as black and black as white. That was mine.
So what's the main skill set that is required to be able to debate efficiently?
Main is the logic. Logic and how well can you convince. So many a times you may know the truth, but how to use the truth to make it fit your point of view. So one thing I have to always say that Quran says, that's a fact. That when truth is heard against falsehood perishes. For falsehood is by its nature bound to perish. That is practical. But debate, this doesn't happen always. But what the Quran says is practically truth will win. But in a debate, it's a perception. Debate may not be always the truth. How you present yourself. If the opponent is weak, and if he's for Islam, and the person on the other side is a good debater, he will defeat. That doesn't mean Islam is weak. So therefore, debate, this point of the Quran is a reality. It is not meant for debate. So in a debate, I have to always tell my student that don't let the person who has the maximum knowledge to go and debate. Let a person who has the debating skills to go. So a person has average knowledge and good debating skill is a better debater than a person who has extreme good knowledge but has no skills of debating. Even if he has less knowledge, he can prove his point. So debating is an art, which Sheikh Deedat, mashallah, had that. And we built on it. So debating is a skill. It's a different thing. A person who's a good speaker. Unfortunately, we don't have debaters in our Muslim community.
Do we need debaters in our Muslim community today?
Of course we need. And at the time of Deedat, we required more. That time of the time. Now, of course, debating is not a must. But there should be some people who should be prepared. So when there is someone, a lion doesn't have to roar. If they know, so, but of course, if there's a point when someone challenges, what are you going to do? You cannot say, I'm not a debater, I will go. Okay, then send somebody else. The debater, we do require. Quran says, Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wal ma'adhat al hasna wajadilum bil ahsan. Surah Nahl chapter 16, 124. Invite all to the way of the Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching and argue with them. Some of the translation and debate with them. In the ways that are best and most gracious. So debate is the word given in the Quran. So, of course, I remember Sheikh Deedat used to tell me, and even to me, whenever we went on a stage, and the organizers used to call us to do dawah, they used to say, Sheikh Deedat, please speak with hikmah, telling me to be soft. So indirectly, going on the stage, there are non-Muslims, so you speak with him. Same thing with Deedat. You speak with hikmah. What did they tell you? Be soft. So, and Sheikh Deedat rightly says, and then I built on that if you read the verse of the Quran of Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse 125, when you ask these people, what is the context? Only Hafiz can give, the others can't. The context of this verse is, if you start at the ruku in Surah Nahl, chapter 16, verse 20, it says in Ibrahim alayhi salam is a beautiful example. And what did Ibrahim alayhi salam do? He broke the idol. So hikmah doesn't mean being soft. Hikmah means saying the right thing at the right time. And I do agree, most of the time you have to be soft. But it's not only soft. So people fail to realize they think hikmah means soft.
Hikmah is not soft.
Hikmah doesn't mean soft, but most of the time it should be soft. So Sheikh Deedat was like, mashallah, mujahid, the warrior, most of the time militant. And then you have Jamal Badawi, most of the time soft. So I tell my students, you have to be versatile. When required, be like Sheikh Deedat or be like Jamal Badawi, like, you know. So a Dai should be versatile.
How do you read the room?
Yes,
and
that's the
understand?
experience. That's the thing. People say, oh, why were you so harsh? So Quran says, Fas'alu ahli zikri in kuntum la ta'lamun. Surah Al chapter 16 verse 43, Surah Anbiya chapter 21 verse 7. That if you don't know, ask the person who is an expert. So the expert is one who knows when to say what. When you have to use the stick, when you have to use the carrot, when you have to be soft, when you have to be harsh. So hikmah doesn't mean always being soft. Most of the time is soft. But sometimes you have to be, and I'll give the example. If your son has seen on the television Superman and he wants to jump from the 10-story building from your house. Dad, I want to be Superman, I want to jump. What will you do? Don't jump, you want to jump. You may slap him. Slapping, there is hikmah. No, listen. You cannot say, no, please son, don't, I want to jump. And he is going, what are you going to do? No, son, you have to give him one tight slap. So at the right time, you have to do the right thing. So at that time, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, what he did at that time was the best. Now the times have changed. The Christian missionaries, they picked on the Quran, they attacked the Quran, and no Muslim could reply. Now the times have changed. So Sheikh Deedat alone took the whole Christendom single-handedly. Alhamdulillah. He was great. Of course, now the times have changed. Now debate most of the time will not be required. People are not there. Of course, we debated a lot one-to-one on the stage. And then now people want to debate to become famous. So I put a clause. You want to debate me? You have to get minimum 2% of my largest audience alone. My largest audience is more than 1 million people. So if you can get 20,000 people alone, for your alone talk, solo talk, not a conference, other people are there. If you can get 20,000 for your talk alone, that means you are fit to debate with 2%. And that's not a 2%. I'm not saying get the same audience.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is not illogical. There are hundreds of speakers who are Christians and Hindus who can get 100,000. But they will never debate because they are popular, they're getting money from their followers, their main aim is to make money. They wouldn't be fools to debate with me. So there are many small Christians, oh, why do you debate with me? I'm there. I said, Khalas. If you can't give it to someone, you convince your Christian brother who can get more than 20,000 people, give your medal and debate with me. So the last time I remember I debated was with Shri Ravi Shankar. Shri Ravi Shankar was 2006.
Okay. That was your last debate?
Last big public debate. Small level, of course. We meet on a public level. 1-to-1 we have had, and recently in Doha I had one, just 2 weeks back. That's another story. But that's 1-to-1. On a public level, and there were more than 50,000 people. And actually he didn't do his homework. He didn't know who I was. And he's very famous. He was the most famous Hindu in the world at that time. He alone could get for his talk 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. He was very famous. So I went to his town, and a person, a Muslim from in between the organizer, and I went there.
In India?
And in India, in Bangalore. I'm from Bombay, I went to Bangalore. And then I think he realized in the ending. So the format was, he would speak.
Yeah.
He would speak first. No, he would speak first. And I would speak, then he would speak, then I would speak. And he agreed. One day before he puts the clause, no, you speak first.
Different tactic if he speaks first or if he speaks first, or if you speak
no,
first.
No, it makes a difference. World of a difference. The person last speaker always gets a better opportunity. He can clarify the points. If both are good debaters, the person who speaks last gets an opportunity, gets an upper hand. So others won't come. Now the thing is publicized for months, and one day before he put it, I said, okay, we agreed to speak for 40, 40 and 20, 20. Let's put a format. I speak first for 50 minutes. You speak for 1 hour. I speak for 10 minutes. He said, done.
At least you get the last...
10 minutes. He agreed. Okay. For 50 minutes, you speak 1 hour. And I spoke. Of course, I had less time. I took my full 50 minutes. Maybe he spoke for half a minute more. There was a timer. He hardly spoke for half an hour. He had no matter. So after half an hour, he wanted to end, and 35 minutes he stopped. And then I spoke for 10 minutes, and it was very clear. It was so clear about the debate that he threatened me on the stage. And it was a live telecast on the opening of our satellite channel, Peace TV English. It was live.
So it was beginning of the Peace TV.
Peace TV, 2006, January 26th, if I'm not mistaken. 2006. It was the first live. The channel started with a live telecast of a debate. And more than 50,000 people all over the world is going. And he threatened me on the stage that, see to it, you don't telecast again, otherwise there'll be riots. So I told him, now there are no riots. Why will be riots? Now when going live, there are no riots.
Exactly.
So why should there be riots? So he was, Knight threatened me. And he may be one of the cause that, to make me, because he's very popular, he knows most of the politicians.
Yeah.
And he collects tens of millions of dollars. He's very popular. Anyway, that was a very good. So that was the last time. And that time I started putting my clause. That time, of course, popularity was there. So anyone who can get more than 10,000, that I used to say.
Okay.
Could get 200,000. So like him, or less than him, there are many. So what I'm putting is not illogical. There are tens of people in India, Hindus and Christians, who can get easily more than 20,000. All these people are evangelists. You go to America, you get...
Why did you stop after 2006?
I didn't stop. I'm willing now also, someone who's of caliber.
Of caliber?
Of course. Anyone who can get 20,000 for his talk, anywhere in the world. For a solo talk, I can debate with him. But if he's a speaker who's unknown, or who's good on the YouTube and has million views, 100,000 followers, that's nothing. If you get my views, if you get my followers on Facebook, I might debate with you. So my follower on the Facebook is 23.88 million as of a month before. 23.8. If you get 23 million, okay, I'll debate with you on the Facebook. So the thing is, I'm not going to debate with paper tigers,
Okay. What was the most memorable debate for you? One that you think, maybe it's the hardest, maybe it was something happened?
The most difficult and academic was the one in America. I mean, I don't mind. We'll go back or we'll continue.
Yeah, we're going to continue to the foundation. But since we opened the debates, we'll close it.
I would say that Shishi Ravi Shankar was one of the important ones, but the most important one was with Dr. William Campbell. Dr. William Campbell, he wrote a book in the 90s, I think. He wrote a reply to Dr. Maurice Bucaille books. If you have heard of Dr. Maurice Bucaille.
No.
He wrote a book on Quran and Bible in the light of science. It was a book trying to prove that the verses of the Quran are compatible with modern science. He was a French non-Muslim who accepted Islam. He was at the French Academy. And he wrote a book. And that was the most popular book on Quran and science. So William Campbell is a Christian missionary. He's a medical doctor, knows Arabic as a language. And he got a PhD in writing a book against Islam. So he published this book, Quran and Bible, of the similar topic. That was Quran and modern science.
Yeah.
Dr. Maurice Bucaille, he wrote a book, Quran and Bible in the light of science.
Okay.
And this book was used in the Western world against the Muslims. And he pointed about 30 scientific errors in the Quran.
Okay.
And no one could reply. So these Christian missionaries used to go to the Muslims in America, at the MSU, at the Muslim Students Foundation organization in Europe. See, this is a book. Reply. No one is replying. And he gave open challenge. So in 1998, I think, or 6, the people from Canada, they wanted to invite me for a dialogue with him. So I read the book. I said, okay, I'm prepared. In 1998.
Did you prepare especially for this one?
Of course, a lot. But first when I saw it, I said, okay, I'm a doctor. On the face of it, it was very difficult. So in 1998, the last moment they cancelled because they thought they could not make a lot of profit. Unfortunately, most of the people in the Western world, they are doing dawah for profit. For dunya, not for akhir. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe we'll come to it later on. So then in Chicago, the students in Chicago, because the book was famous everywhere, the students in Chicago called me. And I have a policy of not to charge, but that time I didn't insist. So they charged about $10 per ticket. And they had about 2,000 seats, and it was filled. And there was, in the Muslim Ummah, there was division. Half of them said, what he did is wrong. Why are you calling Dr. Zakir Naik? Why you want to be insulted in public? And half said, no, we should answer, and he'll do a good job. Or I would say that more were against the debate. The elders and all, they said, the book is so popular, and that time I wasn't that famous. Anyway, the debate took place. The tickets were oversold. They were worried that they would be sued because they sold extra tickets thinking people would not come, and they turned up. The majority, little bit, I think Muslims were more in number of people coming. But it was in Chicago, and it was very well done, and it was very successful. Allah's help was there. So much so that in Riyadh, when one of the medical doctors, just to give you a brief, he saw this debate and he wanted to meet me. I met him. He said, I'm a medical doctor. Normally, and I'm a fan of Deedat, but I've never watched a single debate of Deedat in one sitting. It takes me about 4 or 5 sittings, half an hour. The next day, half an hour. I cannot watch together. I've never done that. And Sheikh did that debate for 2 hours, some 3 hours, so I watch it in 4 or 5 seconds. Half an hour, 45 minutes maximum. So it takes me 4 or 5 different days, maybe,
to watch it.
So once I went to my friend's house, and he was seeing the debate of William Campbell, and he heard William Campbell attacking the Quran. He spoke first, then I spoke. And he was shocked that what he's saying is a fact. He's saying, okay, this is the thing in embryology. And he said, we learned in embryology. So what he's saying is correct. That means Quran is wrong. So he heard it, knowing English well, being a Saudi. Then he saw me coming. So he saw it. So he could not stop the debate. He saw it. Then I came on the stage and he saw me the first time. He said, Khalas, this person is bought. They bought a Muslim. They paid him money. Who is this young person? Now also I'm young, but that was the year 2000. So they saw me with a black beard and a young person, skinny person coming. So he was convinced that these people have paid to this Muslim to get humiliated. So he was very angry. But he said, I want to see what they reply.
Yeah.
And he said, the Khalas, you're going to lose because he's a doctor. And this person is young, he's experienced. What will he reply? In Hindi, non-Arab. So when he heard the reply, he was so shocked. And he saw the full debate with the question and session. He wanted to meet me. And when I came to Riyadh, and that time I used to go to Riyadh often.
Yes.
And so the thing is that what he mentioned was, unless you don't have debating skills, you'll not be able to reply. See, many a times in debate is nothing to do with knowledge. It is something to do with logic.
Logic, huh?
Therefore, you may not, if a person who has knowledge and has the skills, of course, it is nothing like it.
There is also a part of it, emotion as well, don't you think?
In debate?
Emotion, yeah. Emotion in terms of being able to emotionally affect people.
That is a presentation skills.
Presentation skills, huh? Okay.
You are emotional and trying to win. That's called presentation skills.
Okay.
That's for every lecture, not only for debate.
Okay.
So I'm not talking about
like the charisma and stuff.
That's for a speaker.
Okay.
So that is part of debate.
Yeah.
But a person may have charisma but doesn't know how to debate, useless.
That's different. Yeah, that's different.
So in a public speech, when you give a public talk, according to research, the matter you speak carries only 7% of weightage. 93% is presentation skills. How do you modulate your gestures, your eye-to-eye contact? All this carries 93%. And that's another topic which you can speak fast together. But debate, this is there. That is separate. You have to have presentation skills to be on the stage. But if you're a good speaker, a very good speaker, but not a good debater, no, you should not go.
How do you stay, sometimes because when you're debating someone, they can be sometimes very charismatic and they can have very good points. And how do you stay cool, calm, collected, composed, and be able to to be able to explain your points in a very calm manner? Because once you lose your cool, you start losing a debate. How do you?
In the debate, you cannot lose your cool. If you lose your cool, that means not a good debate at all.
So how do you stay calm?
Not a debate, even in the question and answer session, you cannot lose your cool. And there are people who experience to lose their cool, and we can come to know.
How do you stay cool? What is your?
That is by experience.
Experience.
You should not let your opponent who is debating you or your questioner to instigate you to lose your cool.
They try to do that. Huh?
Of course they try. So how do you counter them? Like I remember once, in India, Bombay is a very volatile city. I went to one of the IT college to do da'wah. The Muslims called me, but the majority are non-Muslims. In the IIT again, very few are Muslims. So when you have students union come, the majority are non-Muslims. So one person who is supposed to be known to disrupt programs. Okay. The Muslims are a small number. The IIT is very internationally well known, one of the best of the colleges in the world, IIT. And one was a person, they are known to be like goons and big. So he entered and people, Muslims are worried, okay, Khalas, he's coming, he's going to disrupt our program. And the question answer started. So I told him, brother, don't call me brother. I'm not your brother. In Islam, every human being is a brother. If you're not a human being, you're not my brother. So how to reply at that time without getting angry?
To win the situation.
To win the situation. In a debate, you should not try and defeat your opponent. You should try and win him over. It is better to win over your opponent than to defeat him.
What do you mean win him over? Win him over?
Win him over.
You try to do that, huh?
You should do that. No, you should try. You should do that. See, when you defeat a person, you may win the boxing match, but you may lose him. If you win him over, you win the debate and you win him over also, you become a Muslim.
Did you win people that you've debated with?
Of course.
They accept Shahada?
Yes. But a popular person or the public will never do that. A normal person is a one-to-one or many. So therefore, it's better to win him over. Win him over means he's coming on your side and he's on the winning side. You win him over. You win the debate and you win him over. If you defeat him, you win the debate but you lose him. Of course, in the top debates, we give a knockout to him. That's different.
That's different.
That's different. Because it's on a public level. Because when you give him a knockout, you're winning over 10,000 of his followers. He's a big figure. You can't try to be soft. You have to go for the kill. But with hikmah, you should look, you're very soft, but you should kill him. Kill him means a knockout. Sorry, not literally. It means go for the knockout. So you could see the difference that really this Shri Ravi Shankar is known as a man of peace. Many Hindus call him God. You understand? And he got irritated there. That was I won. I won the debate because you could see him getting frustrated, getting angry. He teaches people how to be peaceful and he could not maintain himself. So I won. I was, Shri Ravi Shankar with all my, with hikmah, smiling, and he's getting more angry and I'm smiling more. You could see the difference. So anyone who knows Shri Ravi Shankar, so many of his followers were hardcore fans. They accepted Islam. When he came and touched my feet that we used to consider him God, now you are a God. I said in Islam it's not so, So you could see the difference. So many of his followers and after that, he made an episode behind my back criticizing me. So many of his followers said, we are shocked at the nature of Shri Ravi Shankar. He's making videos behind back. He lost the debate and blah, 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 So from today, I'm not his follower. So many videos started popping up. And he had many followers in the West. He has more Western followers than me. He's known for that. So a person who talks about peace, who preaches people to be peace, he's known as ambassador of peace. He's getting angry. So
you got your win. That seems to me. I'm feeling that was your biggest win from the. If you were to say that.
No, compared to popularity, of course.
Yeah.
William Campbell was not that popular. As an academic, that was a
big
more
one.
difficult.
Yeah, more
difficult. If you ask me which is more difficult.
The other one was more
An academic, that's academic.
Yeah.
This, of course, this is popularity. This is much more popular. Then he sued me, saying he has copyrights. He didn't spend any money. We spent for the full organization. We spent for the recording. We took in writing we are going to record. We took in writing we are going to telecast it. Then he's suing me in the court for 10 crore rupees that we have copyright. Dr. Zakir Naik is making money.
Did you lose or win that?
Alhamdulillah.
You won. You said accepting people or winning people. And I really want to touch upon a point here, which is, I think, also is as important to mention. You've done a lot of events. And during those events, then during the Q&A, many of the times people accept Shahada.
That's called winning over.
That's called winning over. How are you able to read people to understand? And what is the strategy and the mindset behind those situations where you're able to win people over and you see this person might be able to accept Shahada now? Sometimes I've been watching some of the videos, out of nowhere you tell them, brother or sister, say Ashhadu an la ilaha, and they start saying it, but I didn't see that coming, but you saw it. So what is the strategy when you see people like this? What are the things that you think about?
And at the same time, you'll find sometimes I fire people. So my son asked me, my daughter asked me, why did you fire him? You are such a good person. You have said Shahada. Now this is experience. When you come to know this person has come to disrupt the program. If I don't fire him, and you could see Nigeria, this recent trip in Nigeria about 7 months back, 2 missionaries, I fired them. I said, have you come to preach here? You can hire the stadium tomorrow and call the people, they'll come to listen to you. So this is, you come to know, you should read between lines that this person is a person come to disrupt the program, or this person is a genuine person. So sometimes people tell me, why did you fire him? And sometimes people tell me, this person, he is known to be a troublemaker. How did you come to know you are the troublemaker? I'm seeing him the first time. So it is Allah's help. Many times, the way they ask.
Yeah.
So, of course, we are human beings. We can make mistakes. But Allah's help is there. So the way they ask questions, you can come to know this person asking a genuine question. And when a person asks a genuine question, if you cannot give the reply, so don't just fire him. So this is a mistake that many times people, when they don't know the answer, so they try to beat around the bush. So you have to realize that when you should be able to give an answer with hikmah, and when should be able to turn the tables over. And sometimes the question that a person asks has nothing to do with Sharia. It is plain hikmah. He's telling something which is illogical. What are you going to do? And many times it happened. So here, how do you turn the tables over without breaking the rules of Sharia and yet winning the debate? There are many such examples. That it's a thing that, now what's the answer? This person is talking nonsense. 2 plus 2 is 5. What are you going to do? So if he says 2 plus 2 is 5, okay, brother, no problem. Here, take 2,000, give me 5,000.
Do you remember a specific emotional shahada, someone that accepted something that happened in an event that you couldn't forget? If there is one thing that comes straight to your mind, a specific moment of something that happened that you feel that was a very special moment to you when that person accepted shahada.
As far as giving shahada, there are many. So one particular is difficult, but there are many. And
was there something that touched you specifically?
And there are more of course, the audiences that I used to like. Number 1 is from Bombay. Number 2 is from Dubai. So if you see my programs in different parts of the world that have been recorded, the intellectual audience was number 1 from Bombay and number 2 from Dubai. Dubai also had a lot of Indians there.
Yeah.
And a lot of foreigners from different parts of the world. So in the way of emotional, I remember in Dubai there was a white lady, I don't know which country she belonged to.
Yeah.
But she was a Christian, and she had seen my videos, and then she accepts Islam and she starts crying. Even in Japan, you see the documentary. There are many.
No, I want something personal to you that touched you. Do you remember a specific moment that touched you?
The one that was the most, the best that I would feel in the question and answer session, and the most, you could say, not difficult. Yes, it was difficult. At the same challenging was by the person by the name of Rahul in Dubai. Now this person is an Indian, a Hindu. I think he studied in UK if I'm not mistaken, and he had done his bachelor's and master's in management. He used to come and say that I know more about Islam than management. And he used to do a lot of research. He used to ask me trapping questions. Anyone would feel that he's come to attack Islam and demolish Islam. But I used to think that he was genuine. So every lecture in Dubai, he was there first to ask a question. And non-Muslims, sometimes we give them chance twice also. He's come, you have 2 questions, okay, go behind the queue, another. So in one question answer session, every lecture, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 questions to ask. And everyone knew him. And I felt that this person is genuine. And his questions were attacking. Absolutely, because he did research. And today to attack Islam is very easy. You go to the anti-Islamic side, then you get that. But I felt that he was genuine because he was logical. And he has asked many questions, you can go on the video. One question that he asked, I remember, that he asked that I have read various tafasirs of the Quran. And he's quoting, Ibn Qasir and Sadi and so for which is available in English language. And he said that the first word of the Quran to be revealed was Iqra. And when Archangel Gabriel, when he said to Prophet Muhammad Iqra, Prophet replied, Mana Bikari, I'm not learning. He's saying this in Arabic and English both. Huh? So he's saying, I want to know what did Archangel Gabriel show to Prophet Muhammad that he said, I cannot read. I've read various tafasirs. I did not find anywhere which paper he showed. Where is that paper? Which museum is it in? Is it in Topkapi Museum? So he's giving all this. I want to know which paper did Archangel Gabriel show to Prophet Muhammad that he said, I cannot read. Or Mana Bikari. So like my usual style, I said the brother asked, actually I did not know the answer. Wallah, I didn't know the answer. I said, brother asked a very good question, and the brother asked, now this is my normal format. I repeat the question, but here, one of the reasons to repeat is to formulate your answer. And here I had no answer. I didn't know the answer. But the question was good. It wasn't illogical. So I said, brother, that's a very good question. And the brother asked that, and I'm repeating the question. I said, and I'm thinking, what is the answer? And then Allah helps me. I didn't know, and the brother said that the first video was there, and yet I'm repeating it at the same time. That's the style. By repeating, I'm occupying only 2% of my brain. My 19% brain is thinking for the answer. So Allah helps me. And then I asked, brother Rahul, do you know Japanese? He said no. I said, did I show you any paper that you said no? And he starts to clap like that. You can see in the video. So it was, and so was so short. Nothing to do with Sharia. It was only hikmah. And he starts clapping. And he told me in the thing that I'm not accepted in public. After that, he comes and meets me in the night. The program was supposed to be 8 o'clock till about 1 o'clock in the night. And then he comes and he gives the shahada. He didn't give it in public. He had his own reason.
That was a very nice moment for you.
Very good, of course. The person is asked many questions. And he has made all, but the sad part of it, after that, he never came and asked questions in public. So it's good and bad. Good that he accepted Islam. But after that, when I went to Dubai, he was not there.
He was challenging, but you enjoyed him being there. Huh?
Of course. And I thought he was genuine. Many people said no. I said he was genuine. And he accepted it.
That's from experience, knowing that he's genuine.
Experience. The way the people ask.
I want to go back to the foundation that you started. Sure. See, now we're trying to go back to you. That was just around 91. But before I get to Pakistan and your trip to Pakistan, that was another turning point. Did you start the foundation before going to Pakistan or after going to Pakistan?
I started the foundation and then immediately went.
So you started the foundation and with the help of your dad, because your dad was already charitable. So you told him, instead of giving all of this money to charity, give me a little bit of it for
only
me.
5,000. 5,000 rupees that time was $100. $110 a month.
Okay.
So giving outside so much money, give me $110 a month per year would be about maybe less $1,500, whatever it is.
And what was the main goal of this foundation? Today is the huge foundation, right?
Yes.
But
it has been closed now.
It's been closed. We will get to that.
But yet the world is...
2016 it was closed, correct?
Yes.
But before we get to 2016, why it closed, I want to understand why it opened.
It opened because, as I told you, that the people who we gave the video cassettes to Shazia Library didn't do a good job.
Okay.
We gave them in 1988, the cassettes, and 99, 89, 90. So we thought of making the organization in 1990. So we drafted the constitution in 1990, paperwork, we wanted to be properly. So the first option was keeping the same name as Sheikh Deedat's organization, Islamic Propagation Center International. Mm. So I and my brother had a debate. Should we keep the same name or not? Mm. So my brother, he was the opinion, no, we should not keep the same name. I was keep the same name. The advantage is we get the goodwill of Sheikh Deedat. Correct, everything. My brother said, no, this is not an open country like South Africa. In South Africa, you can openly propagate. In India, by law, you can. But it will not be good to say we are a converting center or a center to convert people or to propagate. So let's keep Islamic Research Foundation. And he being my elder brother, at that time, of course, I should listen to what he used to do. At that time, I was very young. So I said, oh, khalas, what do you say we'll do it? So when we started the organization, he was the president, I was the secretary general.
Nice.
And my father was there, and we took some other 2-3 people, and we made that. Maybe, I think.
Secretary General?
Yes, because highest is the president.
Yeah, I get it. But Secretary General, what was your responsibilities?
No, normally in an organization, the highest person is the president or a chairman, and the second person is secretary general or a deputy president. What do you say?
Okay.
So secretary general is the person who's second highest in the organization.
Okay.
Or it can be deputy president or vice president. The various terminologies used.
Yes.
So in our trust deed, it was the trust, meaning the whole trust belongs to the Ummah. We have followed the rules of the country, and we drafted the constitution. The main was to propagate and blah, blah, blah.
So constitution, you mentioned it a couple of times now. So the constitution was really more of a handbook of what did it include?
So whenever you make a trust, you have to put the aims and objectives of the trust. What is the purpose of the trust? And we are trustees. So there were 6 people we were trustees. Trustees means this belongs to the Ummah, but we are just trustees. Though the money was put for my father. But when we collect funds, we have to see to it that we have to use it way of the aims and objectives of the trust. So aims and objective initially was the it was education, a lot of objectives were there, many.
So constitution will tell you exactly what...
the aims and objectives.
The aims and objectives,
yes.
Okay.
And
then after that, a short while after that, in 1991...
So what happened that in 1990 we drafted, we had planned we'll open 1991 in middle. So Abdul Ahmad Nassif, Dr. Abdul Ahmad Nassif was Secretary General of the Muslim World League, if you know Muslim World League.
Yes.
Rabta al-Islamiyya. Even he's called Secretary General.
Okay.
But he's the most powerful. In our organization, president is most powerful. Okay. So in this government organization, the king or the prince or is the figurative head, like a chancellor. But the vice chancellor is more important. So Secretary General of the Al-Islamiyya was Abdul Ahmad Nassif, very famous person in Saudi Arabia. Have you heard of Abdul Ahmad Nassif? Very famous he was. So famous that they had to remove him and sideline him, put him in the shura. Anyway, he was a wonderful person. So he was a close friend of my father because his mother was from the same village as my father, Kokni, but he was an Arab Saudi.
Okay.
So he came to India and very popular person. Father said, Khalas, he's coming tomorrow. Can you open tomorrow? I said, the interior is not done. What? We have not put the AC. 24 hours we have got. So somehow or the other we put their condition. It's a small office of about 20 square meter.
20 square meter.
A little bit bigger than this room. That was a full office.
That's for everything.
Everything. Only one room. So it was a house which we broke the walls and I just had a bathroom which made into a storeroom. So a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So we started it. So I told my father, give this room. My father agreed and give me 5,000 rupees a month. So inaugurated and after a few months I went to Pakistan to meet Dr. Ahmed. One thing happened that after I got inspired by Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, because of him, I started listening to other speakers. Otherwise, I never used to hear any talks on Islam. Inspired by Sheikh Deedat, only heard him. I finished his tapes, saw it once, twice. How many? We only had about 100 tapes.
You memorized Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, huh? By
Yes.
Because you
Many, yes. Most of it.
a lot of it's
memorize the matter, the style, the tone, everything, and the tune in Arabic. وَإِذْ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمُ, and behold, the angel said, "O Mary, inna Allah astafaki wa taharaki." So not only the Arabic, even the tune, and if he made some mistakes, and I made the same mistake, so it was like ditto, even the tune and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, this tune is not correct. It's not following the makharij. I said, khalas, forget the makharij. It's allowed in the speech. So memorize that. And what he used to, if you at that time, man, to memorize any other verse of the Quran, very difficult for me.
Yes.
But hearing him, it was very easy.
But that brings me to a point, and maybe we can go a little bit to 1997 and come back to your trip to Pakistan. And because you mentioned now Arabic and the verse and stuff, you tried in 1997, was it? You went to Medina for 2 months. You were supposed to stay for 5 months to learn Arabic, or 6 months. You stayed for 3 weeks.
Three and a half weeks.
Okay, so you were supposed to learn Arabic, Al-Quran, and all, because خلاص, you are spreading the word of God. You're propagating Islam. You felt the need of understanding Arabic better and directly, and memorize the Quran in a proper way, and learn Hadith as well, because you wanted to do all of that. How I want to understand that, because to me, being a Muslim, Arabic as well, for me, it's by default. I feel that you should know all that. But maybe for the type of activity that you're practicing, maybe it is not. I'm asking you: how important is it to learn Arabic and learn the Quran and memorize
For
it?
a Dai, learning Arabic is very important. Very important. Is it a fard? No. Is it important? Yes. Very important. One of the most important, but not a fard. Of course, the most important would be help of Allah. As Allah says in the Quran in Surah Imran chapter 3 verse 160, if Allah helps you, none can overcome you. If Allah forsakes you, who is there, then who can help you? So let the believers put their trust in Allah. But if you want to be very successful, knowing Arabic is of utmost importance, but not the most important. Most important, help of Allah. So I'm an exception to the rule. I tried a lot. Allah knows that. I tried a lot.
You tried, huh?
Before 1996, I went to Makkah. And I went on a normal Umrah visa. And I studied under a professor by the name of Nadwi, full name I forgot, who was a professor of Mulqara. I studied with him for 1 month, tried to learn Arabic. He had written a book on how to understand Arabic. But then I said, I want to learn from someone who's the best in the world. So then I came to know that there is a teacher, Dr. Fa Abdurrahim, in Medina, who started the Lugha department in the Islamic University of Medina for non-Arabs. So I said, okay, let's try and go there. So I went there and people said, out of the question, people doing PhD me and him today, how will he teach you? I said, what is it? Let's try. So I went to his office and I met him. And I said, blah, 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 blah. So he said, you gave a talk yesterday? I said, yes. I was sitting in the VIP row in the front.
MashaAllah.
So he said, I'm your fan. So he agreed at that time, so elderly person, so famous. He agreed, okay, doctor, if you want to come, you can come here. I can give you 5 hours a day.
That's great.
After Zohar, when I come back from my office, at that time you were the head of the translation department of Mujamma, of the Holy Quran Printing Press. He had left the Islamic University in Medina. And, we used to go to Asr Salah to pray together, even Maghrib maybe. So 5 hours he used to give. And he said, okay, 6 months would be sufficient, because you're intelligent. So then I went back and I took out an Aqama. After 5-6 months, I cannot stay on a visit visa or a normal visa or Umrah visa. So I took an Iqama from Saudi as a doctor in Saudi Urban Hospital. Anyone in Saudi was a fan of mine, was a supporter, so he made Iqama for me. So I came as a doctor working, but I'm not working, just for the ease of me to travel. So, to tell you frankly, in the first more than half of the time, I didn't spend learning. I spent asking him the difficulties I had about answering the questions by non-Muslims of Arabic language. So I spent time, and he loved it. All difficult questions, these Christian missionaries say that the grammatical reason. What is the reply to this? You give the reply. So now I was with knowledge. So I was with him for 3 weeks. Maybe more than half the time I spent in. Out of 5 hours, maybe 3 hours in. Asking this question, that question, what is the haba, what is this? And he used to answer, and he used to love it, and he became very close to me. But, so we finished the first book in maybe a week. First book. Second book, we finished in the next 2 weeks. And then my brother called me, there's some inquiry from the government, you have to come. I said, no, you have to come. And he insisted that I come. You come and you spend, then again you go back. He said, no, I've got a time from here. So I went to Bombay, and the inquiry was not really great. And now there are 1,000 times more difficult inquiries coming. But that time it was the first time my brother was a little bit more precautious or more overreactive. Okay. And I said, see, because of you I left. So then I came back and I got involved in other work, so I did not go back. So I spent about 3 weeks or a little bit more with Dr. Fab Rahim. And he was staying in the house of Dr. Zia Rahman Azmi, who was the dean of the Hadith department. And he was an Indian, he was a Hindu who reverted. And I used to spend with him about 2 or 3 hours a week for 3 hours. And I learned a lot from him about Hadith. So I had 2 teachers, the rest of the day I was free, so it was easy for me. So this is how it was, that I did a lot,
Yes.
So,
but this isn't it something that you look back on, when you look back at that opportunity? Do you feel if that phone call did not happen, I don't like to speak about ifs, but let's say,
yes, maybe I'd have learned.
Yeah, maybe. And do you think that would have bettered the outcome of what you did, or do you think you being a debater, you didn't need to learn Arabic or memorize the Quran?
Then I started when I met Sheikh Abdullah Storefi. Have you heard of Abdullah Storefi?
Yes.
Sheikh Abdullah Storefi, according to me, is one of the best living Islamic scholar today, according to me. One of the best or the best? Debatable. Okay. Everyone will agree one of the best. People may not agree the best. They may have some other, but according to me, mashallah. He's younger than me. I remember it was in 2010, 11 or 12, I don't know. That time I knew Dr. Arifi, Muhammad Arifi. So at that time, I started giving talks and Jewish gatherings used to come in Saudi. So Dr. Arifi, I said, I want to meet. I said, fine, no problem. Then I was free only in the morning because my full appointment was booked. I said, no problem, come for breakfast to me. So I went to breakfast at about 7 o'clock in the morning. Then Abdullah Storefi wanted to meet me. I did not know him. So I asked my Saudi friend, no, Sheikh Abdullah Storefi, you have to go. He said, any time. So I said, I have only time late in the night at 12 o'clock. He said, no problem. So I went to meet him at 12 o'clock. And my Saudi friend, he's excellent. I didn't know him. He met me. He said, I've got a Pakistani friend. And then my Saudi friend was the translator. He doesn't know English. He said, I wanted to meet you because my students have praised you so much. So you are number one in the comparative. And then we became very close. And I respected him a lot. What a person, mashallah.
Yes.
So why I'm talking about him? Because when I asked him, should I start Arabic channel? We had English, Urdu, Bangla, Chinese. He said, avoid it. He said, why? Because the whole Arab world loves you. I said, Alhamdulillah, therefore I want. He said, therefore you should not. It is weird. If the Arab world loves me, I should have Arabic channel. He said, no. Because now everyone is behind you. If you start speaking in Arabic, you will be competition to them. Then there will be fitna. I said, mashallah, what he's saying is the truth. Because I remember I never used to give Urdu lectures. My Urdu was weak. And now also it is weak. I have to give lectures only in English.
So your English is your first language, you would say?
Technically, practically, yes. Theoretically, mother tongue is with the mother, but the mother tongue is the language you speak the best. So it's English. But if you say Urdu or Hindi, Because at home we speak Hindi, Urdu, English, everything. But the language in which I can write, I can speak, I can dream is in English.
Okay.
Even Urdu, I know, but in speaking, I'm not. So the thing is, I remember that I never used to give talks in Urdu. So the commissioner of Bombay, he always used to complain to me. He's a Hindu. I will only be happy with you if you speak in Urdu because or Hindi. Your speeches are so good, but the masses can't understand English. So it's a waste of this. You're such a good Muslim, want to get Hindu Muslim together, blah, blah, blah. So then I started speaking in Urdu. The moment I started speaking in Urdu, the majority of the ulamas, the sheikhs in India are Urdu.
Yes.
Even those who are Sufis and Barelvis, they used to support me. In English, Dr. Zakir Naik. So all Shia, Sunni, Jamaat Islami, Ahle Hadith, any sect, Dr. Zakir Naik, they should support me. The day I started speaking in Urdu and the audience, 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people, khalas. This person doesn't have a degree, that hasn't gone to Islamic university. We get 500 people, he gets 50,000 people, 500,000 people, hasad. So, enemies. Then I remembered, the Sheikh Abdullah Sarafi, what a man he is.
He saw it coming.
No,
Yeah.
no, he told me about Arabic.
Yes.
So I immediately linked what is, because I had passed that stage.
Same logic.
I said, same logic. In Urdu, all the sect were my fan because no one speaks in English. If they don't speak in English, they go to Dr. Zakir Naik. Now when I start speaking Urdu and talking about Quran, Sunnah, okay, this is wrong, that is wrong, so khalas. So then I get enemies. So I said, this person has a vision. He's a practical man. So if you ask me the question, do you think if I'd read would be better? Allahu Alam.
Allah.
Yet I'm trying. I'll get the ajr for that. I saw to it that all my 3 children know Lugha Fusha from childhood. So all my 3 children, from the age of 3, I taught them Lugha Fusha.
Yeah.
So my son Farik, both my daughters Zikra and Rushda, they learned in our school. I established a school. Because of me, tens of thousands learned Arabic as a language, but I did not. I tried. Allah knows. I went to Makkah one. Even after that, Sheikh Saud al-Shirem is very close to me. He was the Imam of the Haram. Now he resigned.
Yeah.
He's very close to me. He organized a Sudani teacher from Qura to teach me. That was in which year? I forgot. Maybe in 2011. So, 96 I went for 1 month. 97 I have Sheikh Abdurrahim. In between, with my teachers in my school, we had at least 25 or 20 to 25 graduates and postgraduates and PhD from Islamic University Medina, some from Qura, some from Muhammad bin Saud, some from Al-Azhar, all at my fingertips already. I learned with some for 1 month, for half month. Allah has his reasons. We did. We were busy. But with no teacher, I spent more than a month. So Sheikh Saud al-Shurem organized a teacher, a Sudani teacher. Very good he was. All my children also were with me. For 1 month we did. Okay, so I can understand Arabic. If a person speaks Lugha Fusha, I can understand more than 50%, 60%. If you speak Ammi, it is less. In speaking, I'm only 10-20%, but understanding maybe 60-70%. Depends on dialect and whether it is. But I tried a lot, and yet I'm trying. Yet till this day. Till this day. So, and then when I came to Malaysia, there was another teacher, Yamani, who taught us for 3-4 months. Again going to Fabdarim's book. Fabdarim's book, I think, is one of the best. So we did a lot, many times, so all put together. But Allah has His way. Of course, my wife understands better than me. Yeah. Even she used to sit with me always. She understands Arabic better than me. But speaking is not that. I can speak a little bit better because I meet Arab, she doesn't meet. But all my 3 children, I saw to it that what I thought was deficient in me,
yes,
my children should be expert in that. And one of the things was Arabic as a language. We taught my children in our school public speaking at the age of 4. If you have heard my tapes, I was a stammerer.
Yes.
And the first time I went on the stage, I never thought I'll be a speaker. We started this foundation which we're talking about for others. I would only be a caretaker. So this organization we started, I never dreamt in my life I would be a speaker. We thought as a platform to distribute video cassettes and books. That's it. And then maybe I had one friend, his name was Dr. Shoaib. He was very popular. He was elder to me. And he was a fan of Deedat. So he was popular in debating. So I thought we'll make him as one of the speakers. So we started the foundation. We started having weekly question answer.
Yeah.
So my friend went the first week when we started. And somehow or the other, he was a very good speaker at that time. He got cold feet.
Cold feet.
He got cold feet, I went there. The first time I went there, I said, no, what to do? We had 25 students from the engineering college. It was in a small room, this room.
Yeah.
In this room, even 100 people. That's another story. So the small room, as I told you, we started with about 20 square meter, 22 square meter.
Yeah.
And there were 25 people we used to call. And the first time we used to show clippings of Sheikh Deedat, Israr Ahmed, for about half an hour. Clips of good speakers. And then question and answer session. And he got cold feet. What to do? I went there. People asked me. I answered. It clicked. So I never thought of ever speaking in the front of public. I thought I could not do. I could have dreamt of I could have dreamt of becoming the best doctor in the world, but not to speak even in front of 25 people, leave aside large audiences. So that's how it started. So Allah took me to a stage where my friend was supposed to be the main speaker. He got cold feet and then I started speaking and then khalas.
Yes.
Then it became more of me and less of him and that's how it started. I had to only handle question and answer. I never gave a talk in my life.
MashaAllah, Faraq, you mentioned your son a couple of times, and Faraq, he speaks very good Arabic, but I'm going to teach him the Kuwaiti accent. That's a completely different. But coming back to public speaking in the first part, and that's when you also started realizing that when you talk publicly, you're not a stammerer. And now that brings me, remember when we talked about debating skills? Maybe now it's a good time to talk about public speaking skills. And mashallah, you're very good at public speaking, and that's from experience. But if we had to pick one skill, for us to pinpoint and say that's a skill that represents a good part of being a good public speaker, what would it be?
As I told you earlier, that normally research tells us today that when you give a public speech, the matter carries only 7% of weightage. 93% is presentation skills. How do you modulate your voice, the eye-to-eye contact, the gestures, where do you keep your hand, the terminus, everything. This constitutes 93. And we give an example. In matter, there's no book better than the Quran in the world, for the Muslims at least. Now, if I read the Quran, or say Surah Fatiha at 100 miles per hour, in Arabic, wouldn't understand. You can hear some of the words, some I'm meeting up. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. So, in this, the matter is 100%, but I'm not saying it correctly, so no impact. But if you say it, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, it has an impact.
Yes.
Matter is the same. You're eating half the words, you cannot hear it. What is the impact? So, this is the best demonstration. And even give the translation, that if you give with modulation, the impact is different. The matter is nothing better than that. Mm-hmm. So, the presentation skills is very important. So then we formulated a Dawah training program. Initially it was for 1 day, then became 3 days, then became 11 days, then became 25 days. Finally, the big version became 45 days, in which working days were 33 working days. Anyway, so the thing is that, of course, if you have to be an effective debater, you have to be a good public speaker.
Yes.
You have good logic, but you don't know how to public speak, again, the rules goes there. You're a good debater, but you can't speak properly. What is this? So you may say something you don't understand. You lose the debate.
Cool.
So in a public debate, it's different than one-to-one debate. In a one-to-one debate, you may not be a good speaker. You may not be a good public speaker, but you can win the debate because one-to-one is different. So in a public debate, of course, you have to be a good public speaker. And Sheikh Deedat was a charismatic, mashallah. Mm. And he debated with Jimmy Swaggart, who was one of the best speakers at that time. And he won by Allah's grace. So the thing is that, of course, in debating skill is different than public speaking. For a public debate, you should have the skills of public speaking. That's one thing. Mm. But I feel that in my public speeches, my skills were there. Other people have better skills. The main thing of mine that takes the cake is the question answer session.
You prefer the question answer?
No,
that's where you hit the most.
I prefer it separately. That is the way where I feel the people started loving. Because we learned from Sheikh Deedat that Sheikh Deedat quotes and give references. So we went to a step further. Of course, Sheikh Deedat quotes most of the time, but not always. I mean, he's far superior to me. There's no way comparison between him and me. I mean, he gets all the ajr what we are doing. But of course, we studied them. Sheikh Deedat made it as a platter for us. So what he did is 1,000 times better than me. I'm not comparing that way. He had no one. We had Sheikh Deedat. So we had a platform.
Yeah.
Sorry. So he had no one and he started from scratch, picked up a book. He was 6th standard studied. He was not educated. And what he did is phenomenal. So you cannot compare it. We had a platform. He gave it to us on a platter. So for Christianity, we just read his books and we don't have to read any other book. You can debate the Pope after memorizing his few booklets. Of course, we learned about Hinduism and about other religions. That's different. So, but then we also did, I always say, I did a critical study of Sheikh Deedat. He was great. So we saw that and he was the most popular, and he had no competition that time. When Sheikh Deedat was there was no competition in this field. Our time we have got, mashallah, you Google, you'll have thousands of English speaking, thousands.
Yeah.
Coming up here, there, every country. So yeah, that time there was no one, there was Jamal Badwi, there was Imam Saraj Wahaj and Dr. Bilal Flip all under him, but nowhere he was. So that time was different, now it's different. He emphasized on, having video cassettes in the home and making it live. We emphasized on a satellite channel. So of course we grew. So he led the platform to us. So because of him, so we are taking a step further because of him. So we cannot compare what it was excellent. So coming back to it, we did study, how Sheikh Deedat debated and where was, he had done a lot. So where were the weak points? Then we did, okay, fine, we have to study Sharia. So what we realized that sometime, and I discussed this with Sheikh Deedat in detail about these points.
You did, huh?
I normally I tell this only to my students. I don't tell in public platform because, I don't, in no way do I want to undermine him. He's great, but because this is a podcast. And I tell to my students, see, anyone says anything, you check up and then repeat. Check up and then, even mine, I'm no exception. So I'm your teacher. Even when you repeat me, first check it up. If I quote a Quranic verse, number one, you can take out the Ravi from in between. You can take out Dr.ذاكر Naik. The less narrators, more authentic is the thing, correct? Number one. Number two, you yourself have checked up. I can make a mistake. I'm a human being.
Yes.
So here we realize that many a times when Sheikh Deedat attacked the Bible, the same thing was also there in the Hadith and the Quran. So attacking the Quran indirectly. Just a small example, which is the first time I'm telling in a public platform. I've told that in debates, of course, to my students. But if that's how that will come out. For example, Sheikh Deedat said, the Bible says that Musa alayhi salam spoke to God face to face. So if God has a face, he eats, he has anus. The Quran says Allah has a wajh. So Sheikh Deedat maybe that time didn't have much knowledge of the Quran or the Hadith. So unknowingly, he's attacking the Quran. I respect him.
For sure. But he's human at the end.
There's no way am I trying to prove that I'm better. He's 1,000 times better than me. There is no comparison because he did on his own. We had some support. So then we teach always research. Don't just follow blindly, including myself. So then I spoke to these things and he was very, very confident. So who are you, young man? What nonsense you're talking? For example. So here I said that, what is he doing indirectly? They're attacking the Quran. The Quran says Allah is a wajh. That's a different thing that some of the sects of Muslims, there are no sects in Islam, might say, okay, there's not wajh and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so we felt as a Dai, you should know the basics of the Quran and the Hadith. So that's how I felt I should read the Quran, I should read the Hadith, I should make myself strong. A Dai doesn't mean only learn the Bible. So when we learned the Bible, he gave it to us on a platter. So we learned the Quran, we learned the Hadith, and then we repeated everything of Deedat, but corrected the few mistakes.
Okay, so back to the main point. So the most important point, just for me from what I'm trying to understand of public speaking, or the most important skills, gesture, eye contact, tone of voice, talking clearly. But how do you articulate your thoughts? Because in public speaking, especially in a debate, and everyone's looking and everyone's waiting for your answer, there's a lot of pressure. But what is the thought process of you articulating specific ideas in a way where you say things very clearly and there is a beginning, a middle and an end to your point. How do you approach that?
Number one, in debate, you should study your opponent in and out. Number one. Never take it for granted. If I'm having a public debate, I'll never think, oh, no problem, I know my stuff. Never underestimate your opponent. And the debate with Dr. William Campbell, at that time, I had downloaded about 14 files from the internet against Islam. And I gave it to some of my colleagues and some of my students who are medical doctors and all. And many they could not reply. Of course, I sat for about a couple of weeks and answered to all and was prepared. I was prepared that this person, besides this book, so I downloaded all available on the internet, all scientific attacks on the Quran. And I got 14 big files. And to read 14 files will take. So, first I read his book and I replied to all his book, prepared with the answers in written form, everything.
So you go there memorizing all the answers?
Yeah, of course. With reference.
So you don't think of anything on spot most of the time?
No. That is secondary. That is Allah's help.
Yeah.
Of course, we prepare, but finally on the spot is something else. So that makes you a click ahead.
Okay.
And that's Allah's help.
So you memorize. So you went through all of them.
All is on 30 answers and knew all the answers. Then I memorized another few hundred attacks on the Quran. Few hundred. That was more difficult. His was easy. And fortunately, he did not speak anything outside the book. Very foolish. That means I know what he's going to speak. Nothing new. He doesn't know what I'm going to speak. At that time, he only had one tape of mine on Quran. I had other things against. I had spoken against the Bible. I took another 50 things which is not there in my lecture. If he done homework on me, I said something which I have not said before. I'm prepared. So to judge. But what he spoke, I thoroughly memorized it. And the other things also I memorized. Another 10 times more. Another 200, 300 attacks. That's huge.
It's huge, yeah.
To get 200 answers. But naturally, the attack, what he has done is prepared very well, given trials in front of 20 people, 30 people. That's an important thing. Trials.
You do that? You do trials, huh?
Not any longer.
Before.
Every lecture, every public lecture of mine, for the first few years, I had about multiple trials with graduates of Medina sitting there to attack me. So we had a team. It went to 25. So 20 graduates of Medina and postgraduates and PhD. I said, I give a talk, take out mistakes, attack me. They don't know what I'm going to speak. I give once, I give twice, I give thrice, everything. Noting my timing. Okay, now a lecture is too long, what to shut. So when I give a lecture, there are 2-3 timekeepers. Then there are at least 30 people in our auditorium sitting there, out of which all are students of knowledge or scholars, not scholars, students of knowledge. Sitting there, attacking, everything, timing, the video is there, everything. The trial takes place, then second trial after 2 days, then third trial, and then make it because I have to give. So maybe most of the time, if I'm supposed to 1 hour, I speak for 1.5 hours, most of the time. Yeah. And then the matter prepared for question answer is 5 to 10 times more than the lecture. So my question answer session I've got prepared. They ask what they want to ask. Invariably, it's from my answers I've already prepared. So I take all the questions on that topic, whether women's rights in Islam, whether Quran. So your Quran and Bible was the topic. All the questions I've memorized. They don't know. I said, you do your homework, go on the net and attack me. So they go on the net and take out the most difficult question. I've done my homework. So most of the questions they ask if my homework is good, it's from I'm already prepared.
So about preparing more than anything. So all of the work comes before the...
And then once you prepare data bank, then you don't prepare also. No problem. But I'm today also. If I'm debating someone who's unknown and not, I know that he's not a professional speaker. I will not. But if he's a professional speaker, even if he's not, I will not. Debating something now at this stage when you reach, you cannot afford to be caught on the wrong foot.
Yeah, it's more, it's hefty.
At that time it's different.
Yeah.
Now it's a bigger price. So therefore I wouldn't mind debating, but if he's a famous person, I will do the thing.
Do you remember a mistake that you did that you paid for it? Because everyone makes mistakes. Do you remember a specific mistake you made that?
That is the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't consider myself to be a scholar at all. My knowledge was limited. Many a times we said things. I thought something wrong, but no one asked me. I read it today, I correct myself, and the question is asked today. That's Allah's grace.
Alhamdulillah.
Allah's grace. Only 1 or 2, I'll tell you. You see all my tapes. I do not know. I don't have knowledge. I have not gone to studies. I have a view which is wrong. No one asked me question. I read a book. This is answer. And the question is asked the same day or the next day. هذا من فضل ربي. One or two things I remember in my starting, maybe in the 91, when someone asked me the question, if you see my old tapes, you may find, some people keep the hand on top, some people keep the hand down, which is correct. So I read a book of some person. Quran says stand with respect. So some people think this is respect, some people this respect, some people said this is respect. So this I have to repeat. In the starting, 91. My knowledge is very weak. I read a book. Any book in Islam means, okay, fine. And this person happened to be a friend of my father, so he's supposed to be. We don't call him a scholar, but at that time, okay.
Credible at least.
But that is totally wrong. Of course, then we learn hadith. So I gave that answer. That Quran says stand with respect. Some people feel disrespect. Some people disrespect. Therefore, some people pray like that. Some people pray. That's not the answer. Okay, why do you put your trouser above the ankle? Because at the time of the Prophet, people used to walk in the sand. And the answer I gave only once. And then I deleted it. I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
That if you walk in the sand, so because the feet used to go down, therefore to prevent your trousers from getting dirty, they used to be above them. So then I realized these people are not practicing Muslim. They are like Muslims who think logic is everything. So Quran and Hadith is number one, then is logic. No logic can go above the Quran. So don't use your logic to disprove the Hadith of the Quran. Use your logic to prove the Hadith and the Quran. And you cannot just talk from your mind. So whatever answer you give should be an answer of a scholar which I has given earlier. Or if you find a new answer which no scholar has given, ask a scholar and then repeat it. This is very important. I cannot create a new answer. Do you think I'm so intelligent, 1400 years, no one answered on Islam? So people fail to realize that my strict view about answering is so strict. That's the reason I've been saved. So I said, if you're repeating of a scholar, no problem. If the scholar makes mistake, he is your umbrella. Because Allah will not question you. Fasalu al-zikri. I had al-zikr in Kuntalamu, I'll be safe. But I cannot create a new answer.
Yeah.
And there are some questions like about life after death and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ilm that I've got a new answer which is very logical. But I spoke to Abdul Israfi and other scholars who I feel, they said, mashallah, what an answer. And then when I got sanctioned, otherwise I believe, new answer. Who am I? Nothing. So most of the people start writing anything what they think is logical. It has no hadith basis. Just saying that the trouser, you put your leg in the sand and the trouser and the sand touches the trouser, therefore wearing above the ankle. And then I believed in following the Quran and Hadith to the T.
To the T, huh?
To the T. Alhamdulillah. I'm not claiming to be a perfect Muslim. I'm a human being. But then, alhamdulillah, in my organization, okay, keeping a beard compulsory. If you want to be a staff, we have to keep a beard. You have to wear trousers above the ankle. Some say sunnah, some say it is mustab. I believe it's a fard. So it is a dress code. Other people may say you have to wear a suit and a tie. My thing is not required. But my dress code is wearing a cap, which is a sunnah, sporting a beard, and trousers above the ankle. No, don't work. This is my rule. I'm not arguing that, and I know that wearing a cap is not a fard at all. I believe it is sunnah, but I want to do, and then alhamdulillah. So people may think I'm very modern, Quran science, but my trousers, even in the suit, is above the ankle, alhamdulillah. There is difference of opinion, I'm aware of it. All the four imams, they may say it's not a fard, but I disagree with it. I agree with Imam Madhabi, which says that wearing trousers is the kunaya kabira. And then we have views, we have got evidence for that. So when we studied Quran and Hadith with people like Sheikh Ahmed, we learned what is it. Then when we used to meet scholars, we used to spend hours with them. So I did not go to an Islamic university, but alhamdulillah, this is better. Sitting with Sheikh Abdullah Yusuf, we've asked together so many times.
And your responsibility was different in terms that your...
My thing was I'm focused. I am to give the replies of the attacks on the Quran, get the reply to the answers. I'm not so much in fiqh, but then we got involved in fiqh also. That was a different stage. Then I did hijrah. That's another life of mine, that when I did hijrah, my life changed.
Yeah.
And what are the benefits?
We will get to it.
That's different. So, but when we first started speaking, we didn't quote any hadith. I used to only quote Quran. Not the hadith was wrong. Very difficult to understand. Only Quran. Then, oh, so good. Sahih hadith, Zaif hadith. Very easy. La, that's not true. It's not only Sahih, Zaif. Oh, then the more we know, the more we realize we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So this is then life change. Okay, it's not black. First we used to think everything is black and white in Islam. Khalas. Quran, hadith, Sahih. But there's difference of opinion. Then we became more broad-minded. We started accepting that there is difference of opinion. We may have an opinion. I will stick to it very strictly. But if you don't do it, I will not belittle you.
Yes.
Fine, there's a view that niqab is a fard. I believe niqab is not a fard. Someone does niqab, alhamdulillah. No problem. Okay, don't wearing the trouser, there no problem. I will not. So, if we became more accommodative, we went to the level of fiqh, we studied, and then we realized that the top scholars are never so stringent and they're strict on themselves following, but where others do it, alhamdulillah. So that's what we learned. We started being strict in following Islam ourselves. In my organization, are strict. Other people, no problem. My son used to say, Appa, is it so clear that you have to wear trousers with the ankle? How come speakers on Peace TV have trousers below the ankle? He used to object when he was young.
Yeah.
Now, mashallah, he's grown up, so now he's like that. So he's like, Appa, how come you are allowing speakers who are wearing trousers below the ankle? As though, we believe it's a major sin, but I said, no problem. They are thinking it is sunnah, so no problem. So, if we are strict, that is for us. But we have to be accommodative to others. Okay, there's difference of opinion. And if anything said by any of the four Aimma, these are great Imams. Even if we may not think it is correct, it is acceptable. They come under the protection of an alim. So, of course, meeting people and always to meet people of different groups of different sects, as long as they're not too far,
Yeah.
Otherwise, we were so accommodative. So that the vision improved, we could do more work, and that doesn't mean that we relax. So when we meet these top scholars, whether it be Sheikh Abdul Turifi, then Muhammad Saleh Al-Munajjid, then Sheikh Saad Shetri, Abdullah Mutlaq, Sheikh Dadu, then we realize, what is actual. So they are so good and they are so strict at the same time, so accommodative. Otherwise, you see a graduate from Medina coming and then saying haram, halal, so that's how being accommodative and at the same time. So coming back to the thing that when you hear a speaker, don't just follow directly. You have to do research. So then we realize, for example, a statement that was made by Sheikh Deedat, that you're believing that a person who had 99 fathers and grandfathers, talking about Jesus Christ in genealogy, and he had 99 fathers and grandfathers, So he had 99 fathers and grandfathers, and you say that he's God. But when you do research, there are 132 actually, because there's one more genealogy. Okay. So when I spoke to Sheikh Deedat, he said, okay, all the more good. No? So we repeat it by default.
Yeah.
But when we study that, we come to know that it is different. So whatever said and done, you should check yourself.
Great. 91, I want to go back to the second time where your life changed. The first time when you met Sheikh Ahmed Deedat. The second time in 91 when you met Dr. Isra Al-Ahmed.
Dr. Isra Ahmed.
Yeah. From Pakistan. And you went to Pakistan, you met him, and he gave you two pieces of advice that changed your life 180 degrees. That's what we say in Arabic. I'm not sure if it's the same example. What happened and how did it affect your life?
Because when I met Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, I realized that Da'wah is the best profession. As Allah says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا قَالَ إِنِّي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Surah Fussilat, chapter 40, verse 33, that who is better in speech than one for the way of the Lord, works righteousness as a Muslim. So that time was my turning point in life, where I wanted to become a doctor, and my mother wanted me to become a heart specialist, and it was focused. But then I met Sheikh Deedat, I started. So when we started the organization, my brother was the president, I'm the secretary general. We had no intention of being a full-time guy. It was okay, start. Maybe because I had planned to do my post-graduation. In post-graduation, you have to be 24/7, 6.5 days at the hospital. 24/7, stay there. Maybe you get off for 12 hours to come home. So I thought, okay, maybe when I come home 12 hours, 2 hours I'll give to the organization. So when we started the foundation, my aim was to spend 2 hours a week. My post-graduation, how can I sit here? No, I started for the Ummah. I'm just going. That's for the intention we started, that I will spend 2 hours a week. But when we started, I was doing my internship. I was free. I'm going to do my post-graduation after 1 year. So when I started the foundation, I was doing my internship, where I have to spend 6-7 hours, and the remaining time I'm free. So most of the time I was in the foundation. We had one employee who was handicapped, couldn't pick up a box, so I was involved in doing all sorts of work. And as I told you, I requested my father to give me 5,000 a month. And he said, no problem. And that's how we started. We had a meeting. We wanted to give him 800 rupees and he wanted 1,000 rupees. We had a meeting. Should we give him or not? Anyway, so coming back to it, then in 1991, I went to Pakistan. And my main purpose was to meet Dr. Israr Ahmed. Dr. Israr Ahmed, according to me, was one of the best Urdu speakers at that time. And even now. He was a medical doctor. And he practiced for about 7 years. Then he gave up his practice and got involved in the study of the Quran and giving lectures. His main intention was mainly Islam. He wasn't doing da'wah to non-Muslim. Because he came from Pakistan, his main intention was to get the Muslims on the straight path. And his main intention was people to study the Quran and follow the Quran. Number one, Quran. Number two, he was very much against shirk. So his talks on shirk were very powerful on Tawheed. And then third, he also had the intention of aqamat-e-din, establishing the Sharia in the country. Pakistan. But I wasn't so much involved in this third agenda. More in the first, getting Islam and studying the Quran. When I read his tafsir of the Quran, it was wonderful and I knew his background. So my intention was to meet him because I loved him in Urdu. And even purchasing his video cassettes. And my hobby was to collect videos. So we collected video cassettes all over the world. Maybe we used to claim we are the largest video cassette library, Islamic video cassette library in the world. At that time, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 video cassettes. It was like we used to boast about it. Then we collected the largest CD-ROM, Islamic packages, that time over 200. We had the largest collection of Islamic games in the world. And so on and so forth. So when I was to go, I had to collect all this. So when I went, first I had gone to USA, I collected all his tapes from USA, from his center in Chicago, from New York. Then I went to Karachi, I picked up, I went to Lahore, I met him. And I saw the simplicity that he had, mashallah, very simple. He was very famous, but very simple, very humble. He welcomed me. He said, why are you coming here? So I said, I've come to visit Islamic organizations. So he said, son, you will find many Islamic organizations in Pakistan, but you will not find Islam in Pakistan. And that time he said, what are you doing? I'm doing medical. So what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do da'wah as well as become a surgeon. So that time he told me, son, you have to choose. If you want to specialize, you cannot do both. I said, why? I'll do da'wah, I'll finish my medicine, then do da'wah part-time, both together. He said, I tried for 7 years to do both. I could not. I had to choose whether to be a doctor or a da'i. You can do part-time both, yes, but you can't specialize in both. So I have to choose between one of the two. So he was a person who was, I want to be a da'i, but I thought I'll do both together. When he said that you have to choose between the two, so I had to take a decision. Should I specialize in becoming a doctor or?
It's a big decision.
Big decision, yes. But naturally, my parents, whatever I said, they were very free. And he told me a second thing, son, if you want to be a da'i, see to it that you make your requirements very less. Don't depend on the worldly things. Make it least so that no one can blackmail you and you don't become dependent on them. Because once you get used to a luxurious life, having good car and a good apartment and a good house, etc., then you cannot live without it. As a da'i, you may have to sacrifice. So you don't require it. Don't let it be a part of your life and don't depend upon it. And I saw so simple he was. His room was big, but very simple, only table, chair. His house was simple. I said, mashallah, we thought that it's coming on the television. No? So that was a very important advice he gave us. And alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, my father was doing very well. And we had no problem about living. And my father also had the same idea that you want to do, I will give you money to buy the best of books, to go and travel and see the world, but not to see movies and,
But how are you going to make a living out of it in terms of, because at the end of the day, you're dropping out of becoming a doctor and a surgeon.
So
a surgeon makes a lot.
Of course, a lot of money.
Yeah.
And my father was doing well.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything because we were on the panels of, we were on one of the panels for those people when they go to the Gulf country, whether Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, they have to do medical tests. And we were one of the 19 doctors that were appointed. So it was a lucrative business. Making a lot of money and doing nothing. Just appointing some doctors and very good. And I and my brother were appointed on the panel. My father was the main person, but then it was me and my brother were on the name, running the medical center.
Yeah.
So we established a pathological medical center, and I was involved in it a lot. So my brother has a brain, but I in the interior, because I have a passion doing interior everything, So I have a passion of learning new things and, studying it critically. So I was involved for a few months or maybe 7-8 months in setting up the whole setup, a proper architecture, interior. So therefore I can tell you what is the furniture, what is all. We know about it. So then it became technology, cameras, So we reached a level cameras, what is the microphone, the show company, Sennheiser, what is the best. So we are in and out. So therefore a person, like I remember when I went to America for the debate of William Campbell, those Hollywood people had come. We had taken 2 crew of us. And, these people, they think, who's this Islamic speakers? I learned because of this. So sometimes the technique to know who I am, they may think an Islamic speaker wearing a cap and trouser above the ankle, maybe an ignorant person. So when we tell them something about shooting, they may not know. So if I ask them, which camera do you have? What's the microphone? What's the model? Is it Sony number? So when I use some models, they are shocked because we know the best in the world. So purposely to see to it that they follow me rather than try and act smart, when we give the names of the models and with the numbers and which is the best cameras, of course, those are old. Now we know the latest ones.
You're earning your respect.
Khalas, he's shocked. Who's this person? Because people in the field don't know. So we normally, of course, it's my field to know what is the best camera, the best microphone, because we believe in using the best first.
Okay. We're going to get to
only by looking at it, I can tell you what is the level of each one. Because we use the best and the most expensive in the world. Our channel, even today, even though we are at a low budget now. So we can go in and out technical. I can talk about 4K, 5K, 4K, 8K, 6K, what is the resolution, everything. Just by looking at it, I can tell you what it is or what is the level of the studio. That person may think he's great. He doesn't know me. So we don't want to show off, but when we have to, like when I go to Dubai, we have the American people on the switcher. I just, okay, highs, up, down. Okay, put the frequencies. So what I'm used to, what it is. Okay, which mixer do you have? Do you have Midas switch? Do you have Allen and Heath switch? So when I take a few names, khalas, he's shocked. So, because this is a field. So we are involved in, except medicine, we were involved in everything for Dawah, then got involved in medicine when we started having medical centers for the Ummah. So coming back to it, we have to learn our things very well. So coming back to it, when we met Dr. Israr Ahmed, I learned from him that I was choose between the two and I chose to be Dai. And he said life should be simple. And that I made it a policy. Life should be simple, and Allah blessed us that Allah had given us the wealth that we could. We could buy good things. Then we started earning. We could own Rolls Royce. But we prefer having a simple Toyota car. And you may have heard in my talks, I have an Innova car. That is the highest I can go. Innova car, Toyota, in Indian standard is middle. In this standard here it may be low, but that's the highest that I feel I should own as a Dai. Allah has blessed us. We can have Rolls Royce, Lamborghini, etc. But we always believed in being simple and spending in the way of Allah. And there was an opportunity in World Cup that in business, we started the biggest, this you might have heard, or may have heard, I don't know. Only once I've said that. I'm saying it the second time, that during World Cup, we had a opportunity to open a business in Qatar, the largest luxury renter car in Qatar. There, we owned 134 luxury cars, right from Rolls Royce, Lamborghini, Bentley Flying Spur, Bentley Bentayga, Maybach, S450, many, multiple. And the list goes on. We owned it. The lowest car in my business was 3 times more expensive than my Toyota Innova.
Who is we? You and your brother and your family, or?
Family, yes.
Family.
It's me and my son. I put the name of my son.
Okay.
My son is a millionaire. I'm not there. I'm not there.
Okay.
I say we because it's in his name, it's not in my name. Because I've taken my name out of all the business in the organization because of the allegation that is there. So the thing is that for business we're doing it. When I go to meet my daughter in Doha, Hamad bin Khalifa, if I take the cheapest car, it is yet 3 times more expensive. That's the E200 was the cheapest car, Mercedes E200, which is 3 times more expensive than Innova. Okay, our business didn't do that well because of the various things. We thought many people will come, many weren't allowed, whatever the reason. Anyway, yet we are doing the business because what we do, we give free to du'ats. So the business may be going in 5% loss now, but the free that we give to dais, that's our, we give millions of riyals of worth of free every year. Any dai comes free. So that's all our businesses. We try and see what we can help Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the cause. So to put the point of it that when we can own 134 luxury and super luxury cars, can't we own? Of course we can.
Yeah, can you?
So Allah, okay, so just to take the thing out of my son, we went to Dubai and I had my friends who have deal in cars. I made him many years back, when he was young, maybe in the 2012, 13, when he was just got the license. I made him ride all the cars, except most of the cars, Lamborghini, Ferrari, everything. I said, take it out of, so no one can tell you have not driven. When we owned, okay, we did test drive all the cars. We went up to in a Lamborghini Urus. We went more than 300 kilometers. That was my son, don't go fast, but when I drove more than 300, so he went along, he also drove more than 300. So the thing is that, Allah has blessed us. But we have to be simple. And I tell my son, never, never, never. And when you do business, see to it that you make Allah as your partner. And when you make Allah as your partner in business, you have to make him a greater share. You can't give him 5%, 10%. So whatever business you do, minimum 51% of the profit should go to Allah. For you, I'm a veteran, so I have to give more. How much I give, don't ask. So my son, I said, you have to give. Not a fard in Islam, but fard according to my principles.
Yeah.
Not in Islam.
It's philosophy that you own.
Yes, I said, of course. We make Allah your partner, khalas, we'll be secured. And we know when we did Hijrah, we were zero and we restarted again, Allah gave us. So the thing is that you have to have faith in Allah. Coming back to a question of Dr. Isa Ahmed, where we went, he taught us to be simple, and we have to be simple. Number two, you asked me that how will I earn a living? Yeah. My parents, class, I told my parents first I want to give 2 hours a week. They said, no problem. Then I said, I want to give 2 hours a day. They said, no problem. I said, 50% dawah, 50%. So when I was setting up the complete pathological lab, I said to my parents, I'll give 50% for dawah, 50% for medical. No problem. Then I said 2 hours medical, remaining dawah. They said, no problem. I said full dawah. They said, no problem. So I was secured from my family. And my brother, who was 50% partner, Dr. Muhammad Naik, he said, Zakir, you give your full time, yet you will get 50%. I said, no, see, I'm giving full time. You give me what you want to give me. If you don't give me, also no problem. He said, no. You are going the way of Allah, 50%, even if you don't give any time here, 50% of the earnings will go to you. I was 50% partner. So I had support from my parents, from my father, from my sister, all of them. But a couple of years later, I started a business of Islamic books.
Business.
There was someone who was, my brother-in-law used to handle the Islamic bookstore, and we used to go and lost every month 30,000 rupees. I said, what is this? So I took over, and I'm a different type. I buy in wholesale class. I bought the thing, I invested. I told my mother to give me 15 lakh rupees. 15 lakh rupees will be somewhere close to 70,000 maybe real, maybe about 6,000 KD or whatever. Yeah. I don't know exactly. 15 lakh will be somewhere close to 6,000 KD, approximately.
Okay.
So to 6,000 KD for my mother, I started the business
so just for the listener, that's around $20,000. Around $20,000.
Yes, $20,000. Yes. Okay. Would be less than $20,000. Yeah. If it's whatever it is. Yeah. Somewhere close to that. I took from my mother, and then I started the business. I bought in wholesale. To everyone discount who buys. Yet I'm making a profit of more than 100% a year. Within 8 months, I gave the money back to my mother. And I expanded my business. Then I got involved in many businesses, into mobile businesses, and real estate. And mashallah, started earning millions. Alhamdulillah. And initially when I started, I had to give 25%. Because this is what I told my parents. Okay, let's sit, we had a meeting. Besides the zakat, 25% we should put. So much, okay. So I was the youngest in the family. What I told my parents, they agreed. So that was when we started the foundation in 91, 92.
You were a good debater. No one wanted to debate.
I told my parents, they agreed that besides the zakat, 25% will give in the way of Allah. Okay. All the profit. They agreed. So I remember when I started the channel, I told my father $10,000 a month. $10,000. Who will give? And then you start, others I'll get from outside. So we started that house. So anyway, when I started my business, initially 25, but within a few months it changed to 51%. Yeah. I said, no. 25% is wrong. That's for my parents, not for me. So then we said 51% of the total profit. And then it kept on increasing. Till what level, please don't ask me. But so coming back to it, the more we gave, the more we retained behind. My policy was the bigger percentage you give, the percentage with you remains less, but the amount is more. So when we tell other people to donate, even we are donors. Of course, the budget increased. We became the largest Muslim Dawah organization in the world. So coming to the finance part of it, my parents supported, but they used to give me monthly. I remember they used to give me 40,000 rupees. That is about $500. $450. Then they made it 70,000 rupees, and they started to give it charity anyway. So when we shifted to Malaysia, it was the same. And even now I tell, I require only $500 a month to live with me and my wife. That's it. Forget my children. Sufficient.
So you're not dependent on those businesses, are you, in terms of living your life?
Of course.
You're not.
No, I get money from there.
You are dependent.
For my living,
Yeah.
to make $500 is very easy. I can make anywhere. Correct? But these businesses make a lot of money.
No, I get it. But for you to make it, to live, you don't depend on having a luxury life on a personal level. Do you?
That's the reason even all my business stop. Some money I save, it can let me live the rest of my life.
Okay.
Correct? The thing is there, because I give, so the thing I'm telling you that I today require only $500 to live because I own the apartment. If I don't own the apartment, I require $1,000 a month to me and my life to live everything, but not Dawah activity. Make a note of that.
Yeah.
My Dawah activity is expensive. For me and my wife to live, because we own the apartment, $500 equal to 2,000 ringgit, more than sufficient. Or 2,000 riyals. Or if you put in KD, how much is it? $500.
150 KD.
Yeah, that's I require. But for my personal wife and for my guest. But when I travel, I pay for my own ticket. Unless I'm called from the government. The government calls me, I cannot. Anyone calls me. Even when Walid bin Talal's brother, you know Prince Walid bin Talal?
Yes.
His brother. I won't take his name because I know many of the brothers. I don't want to expose that. So one of his brothers called me and his manager told, oh, Sheikh Zakir, you have been called for. Yes, I accepted the prince invitation. Okay, which hotel will you stay in? Ritz-Carlton? I said, no. I told the prince, I'm going to come. No, where will you stay? Will you give a first class ticket? I said, no. I'll come. My prince will get angry. I said, I promise the prince I'll come. I didn't say that I will. So I don't take anyone. I pay my own. Even now, I came in my own air ticket. Unless if the hotel is sponsored by the owner, okay, then I don't insist. Otherwise, I pay for my own hotel also. Yeah, mashallah, the hotel was sponsored by the owner, so no problem. And this time when I came, the organizers, may Allah give them jaza khair, you know which, they hired a car from outside, Mercedes G500. And they're asking me, which car we want to have. I said, you're hiring a car? Get from your Toyota. No. Anyway, I told them I don't want. Next day, a G500 comes out of the hotel outside Regency. I got angry. I said, Baba, this you're renting? Yes. Why your G500 is expensive? I was very angry and I forced them that I should give them. So immediately they gave the car back. We sat for that couple of hours. I said, Baba, get a small Toyota. Then they got a Nissan petrol, okay. I said, why? This is israf. We always travel in economic class. Not that we can afford a first class. Because if I travel today, a business class costs about 4 to 5 times more than economic class. If I travel in economic class, 4 other dais can travel same place to do dawah, right or wrong? So I prefer sponsoring 4 dais for the money and me. Of course, the business class is luxurious. When I was young, I would say, these people are fools when I was very young. Paying 5 times more. Now when I sat, of course it's luxurious. Who didn't want to travel in a first class with a cabin in the A380? Of course. You'd love it. But no. Yes, unless I'm called by the government. If I'm getting an award, I cannot tell the king or the president that, oh, I'll pay my own ticket. I don't want to be rude. So when I'm called by the government, if I'm a guest of the government, I accept. But if any other organization calls me, I pay my own ticket, I take care of my own hotel, I say, and I put a clause, you should not charge any money for my lectures. You cannot. I remember when I first went in 1998 to Canada, 96 to Canada, and 1992, they're charging $10, £5. I said, why? Not to organize. I said, no one can support. Then after a couple of years, I put a ban. If you charge, I'll not come. And then I put this clause. First we used to say, okay, if you give economic ticket, no problem. Then I said, khalas, I'll pay my own ticket, you cannot charge. You can ask donors to give. Yet I had to go for conferences till 2009. Last conference, and I had gone to the GPU 2005. They kept 200 pounds to sit next to me. The last conference I attended with ticket was 2009 in Journey of Faith in Canada. After that, I said, Khalas, I will not, if you charge, I will not come for the conference. And just an incident, tomorrow, there's a conference in America.
Tomorrow.
On the Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
And they kept $30. And they wanted me to come. It was on-site and online. For 2 days. $30. So I said, first of all, I'm so busy. I'm traveling. I'm in Kuwait. I don't have time. And secondly, you are charging money. So out of the question me coming. So the main head told, if you make it free, will you come? Will you come online? I said, done. So tomorrow it's from 5 o'clock Kuwait time, 5 to 6, I'm booked for this online.
Okay.
So they made the full conference free where they charge. So I believe, no, I'm not saying it's haram to charge.
Yeah.
But why do you want to, Asaba didn't charge. So I have a different way of, and Allah gives you. So I feel a dai should be simple, a life should be simple. But today you find dai is demanding. You want business class ticket, you want 5-star hotel, and blah, blah, blah. Allah has blessed us. Many people have given me the private jet planes to fly. Alhamdulillah. If it's their own, yet I insist that better, if you give the cost of the petrol, that will be better than letting me fly. So the point is that you do it for sake of Allah. Allah gives you everything. So the life should be simple. So we started it. Of course, my parents used to give me monthly. But our business was much more than I started giving my parents,
Yes.
A few months, then expired.
And slowly it grew and you slowly started.
Of course, and then it grew and then grew. And then, alhamdulillah, then we started donating millions of riyal. If we have to be part of, when we're asking others to give donation to our organization, we should be one of the, we're not the biggest donor. Percentage-wise, we may be. But money-wise, of course not.
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit and give context to, because I want to get to Peace TV in 2006. So I will give context. In 1997, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, was it 97, right? He got a stroke. 96. He got a stroke. You went to South Africa. You went to check on him, and then you did his lectures. But 2 years before that, in 94, you gave a big lecture in a mosque in South Africa.
Correct.
And the Sheikh Ahmed Deedat gave you a certificate, Ahmed Deedat Plus. And you said that was
Deedat
Plus. And that was, you said, that was one of your proudest moments. He told you that what you achieved in 4 years, they were able to...
No, that was later.
That was later, huh?
That was
when he wrote.
Yes. No, when he spoke with his eyes, when he was in stroke.
Yeah.
So 1994 was one of my first lectures outside India.
Yeah.
And who was in my audience? Sheikh Deedat.
You felt nervous?
Of course. What will he say? I felt, I said, I have so many mistakes I'll make. And I gave a talk in the mosque. He wasn't allowed to give talk. Because he was banned in the Grey Street Mosque.
Okay.
His office was opposite Grey Street Mosque, which was the biggest mosque in the southern hemisphere. And I gave a talk, and there was a huge audience, and he said, and he appreciated me. And of course, that was his humility that he gave me the title Deedat. But of course, I was nowhere close to him. Yeah. So in 1994, he gave me Deedat Plus. He got the stroke in 96. And in year 2000, with his eyes, when I went to meet him, that time he gave me the plaque.
Yeah, so and when you went to meet him in 2000, he wrote through
his eye contact.
And the technology at the time, the medical technology, he wrote a sentence. You waited for that sentence to come out, and he said in that sentence, what you did in 4 years, they were able to achieve in 40 years.
Son, what you have done in 4 years had taken me 40 years to accomplish. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So with the blinking of his eyes, he could spell each letter. And the son was used to it. He wrote down.
Yusuf.
And then they gave me a plaque with his thumb.
Yeah.
That
was your greatest achievement, you feel?
Of course, that was the greatest award that I got, I would say.
Award.
Yeah.
Great.
Of course, I've got that award.
Yeah, so I want to go to 2006, Peace TV. I will give you some context to Peace TV. In January 2006, it's a channel to spread Islam and promote Muslim speakers, and you were able to reach up to 200 million. Later on, yeah, it grew to reach...
All the four channels put together.
All the 4 channels put together. So you had a channel in India, you had a channel in Bangladesh, a channel in...
No, in English, number one first. Okay. All were playing from Dubai, another part. Dubai, and then London, and US. So first channel was in English, 2006 we launched it. And the Urdu was launched in 2009. When we launched Peace TV English, within a few years it reached 100 million viewership. Then we launched Peace TV Urdu in 2009. Within a few years, it reached a viewership of 80 million. Then we launched the Bangla channel in 2011, which reached a viewership of 50 million in a span of few years. Then we launched Peace TV Chinese in Mandarin language in 2015, which reached up to 20 million. So all put together was 200 to 250 million. Some common viewers.
Yeah.
So 200 to 250 million was the viewership.
And this is really the last chapter that I want to kind of speak about, because from Peace TV, a lot of things started changing during those times. A lot of things that controversy started happening, your hijrah. It all kind of started from that route, from Peace TV, and how you became worldwide, and you set the stage. Not just going to places, but broadcasting a channel and being able to capture a huge audience. So what happened with Peace TV? Why did it become... You also in 2009 were named the second most powerful person in India, according to Indian Express, a huge newspaper.
Third most powerful religious person.
Religious person, huh?
In the top 100, I was rated number 82. Out of 1.2 billion people, they released the list in 2009, Indian Express, which is a very famous newspaper, top 100 powerful Indians. In that, I was rated 82. And there was a separate list of the top religious leaders. I was the only Muslim. I was rated number 3. In 2010, I became number 1.
Alhamdulillah. So to a point where in 2012, you had a live event and 1 million people showed up.
There's more than 1 million people, yes.
More than 1 million people
live
showed up to that event. You became huge. You blew up. That as we you.
Allah's.
Hey, well, I'm giving context to the listener here, and I don't want to really speak about the details of what happened, because I think what's very important here to understand how did it, not just how it grew, but when it grew a lot, other things started happening. In 2009, before that, in 2 years, you were approached by the UK government to help them reach Muslims in the UK. But in 2010, the government banned you because the government banned you a year later. So in 2009, they wanted your help. In 2010, they banned you. And they also fined Peace TV £300,000 for hate speech. What happened? And that's the first incident really of everything else. So I want to speak about the first incident.
You know, the question asked to me yesterday when I was giving a speech at the Islam Center, that what is the biggest hurdle for dawah? I said the biggest hurdles are the politics.
You think so?
No, I think so. I know it. I don't think so. I can give you proof. Yeah. The biggest hurdle are the politicians, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. It's the same. So in 2009, the government that approached me were the Labour Party. That was a little bit pro-Muslims. So they approached me knowing my popularity, so that maybe I can help them. And that was the truth. They did a research and they knew I was popular there. And my channel was popular, so they could not reach those Muslims who were deviated and, want to do suicide bombing and kill people. And I said, yes, I'm willing to help you. I have 2 conditions. Don't ask me to do anything against Quran and Sunnah, and I don't want your money.
Okay.
In 2010, the government changed. The Labour Party lost and Conservative came. So their target was, we have to attack Muslims. They were not bothered about anything. So they asked Theresa May, became the Home Secretary. She asked the police, who is the most popular speaker? Zakir Naik. She doesn't know anything. Oh, you banned him. But how can you ban him? He's coming to give a talk in the web. No, just finish him. But we have nothing against him. Find out, scan his speeches. Something he said against the UK law. He said, we have scanned nothing. In fact, we approached him to help us. And this is because I know people in the police after that. There was one person was a Muslim. Then they said, go to CIA. They met CIA. CIA said, nothing against Dr. Zakir Naik. Okay, yet ban him. If he bans, he'll go to court. I will handle the court. That was it. And the right word is excluded, not ban. Excluded is the right word. Because in UK law, ban means they cannot sell my tapes, they cannot show my videos. The right technical word for UK is excluded. Excluded means I'm not allowed to enter UK.
By amount of years or forever?
It's for 3 years only.
Okay.
But then they can extend it if they want. So the right word in UK is, in other countries you say ban means ban from entering. So here the right word is excluded. So we did a case against them. And my lawyer said 99.9% you'll win. They have no chance. But naturally, hiring the lawyers is expensive. So there was a friend of mine who was a fan, a businessman. He said, we'll hire the best of lawyers. And he spent £1 million. But he told, Zakir Bhai, they call me, yes, as elder brother, though he's elder to me. He said, Zakir Bhai, we'll lose that. 95% will lose according to me. Because he has businesses all over the world. He has business in UK, fighting the government. 95% will lose, but we'll give them a tough fight. My lawyers are saying 99.9% will win. The person who's giving £1 million on my behalf is saying 95% will lose. So I like his taqwa. And we won in the first round, second round, third, and finally we lost. We lost the case, but we won the battle. They could not ban Peach TV.
What was their allegation?
Correct. The allegation was Zakir spoke so and so thing. Okay? And there were some speeches out of context.
98.
No.
Not the 98 speeches.
They banned me in 2010.
I get it, but wasn't it based on speeches you made in 1998?
98. One was there in 2006, correct? So the lawyer said he was given the visa in 2009. If he made a speech in 98 and 2006 and you're banning now, that means the government didn't give a good job by giving him the visa in 2000. Technically, they had no place to stand. So technically, they were weak. So therefore, the first round we won. But then the government can force the judges. They talk about freedom of speech. So the judge went to the extent of saying, you have hired 3 QCs. If you win, we'll only pay you for 1. Because they have to pay for the charges. So anyway, we won the first round. The second round, they won little, and they finally went to the High Court and we lost. But because they knew that we will not keep quiet, they could not ban my channel at that time. So I was excluded from entering, but my channel was continuing, my books could be published, my videos could be shown. I was excluded. They took speeches out of context. And I said, every Muslim.
But why do you think they would target you?
Because the agenda of the new government was attacking. There is Islamophobia. Therefore, previous was Labour Party, which was pro-Muslims. Not pro-Muslim, helping Muslims, but not attacking Muslims. They were neutral, not pro. It's the wrong word. But the new politicians, conservative, their vote bank was attacking Muslims, like how it is in India. So the main vote bank was attacking Muslims. So they had to attack Muslims. Then they banned him in Sudesh. And so they banned, but I was the first target, because I was the most popular. So we did a case against them. And finally we lost, but they did not attack our channel. Our channel was safe, and we continued from 2010 up till 2018, when we decided ourselves to stop our channel because of other reasons, not because of this. So the thing was that we fought the case. Yeah. And initially we won. And what we did then, we hired the best publicist.
Best publicist?
Publicist in the world, Max Clifford. Now Max Clifford is very expensive. He's based in UK and supposed to be one of the best in the world. Publicist. So when my friend went to him, when he heard my name, Zakir Naik, no, as though indirectly, I don't take cases of Muslims. He didn't say that. No, I'm too busy. The only Muslims case he has taken is of Dodi Fahad, who was linked with Diana.
Yeah.
So he is very good. But when my friend left his office, he Googled and he saw. Then he called him, come back. Okay, I don't mind taking. Then I flew to Paris to meet him because I couldn't go to UK. So I flew to Paris. He came. Very expensive. But I'm not paying money. My fan is paying. So £1 million was all paying the lawyers, and then he organized my debate in Oxford Union of Debate. I was the first Muslim religious person to speak. So I spoke from Bombay. I could not come to UK. I was live telecast. Theresa May told the president, you can't have this. So the president of Oxford Union Debate, in which Albert Einstein debated. At that time it started. So I was the first Muslim religious person. There have been Muslim politicians who have spoken. So he said, no, it is freedom of speech. You have no right to interfere in our thing. So she could not stop it. She tried to ban the satellite. She could not, because there are some rules. At that time, the rules were better. So we had a live telecast, and all over the world it was telecast. So that was an achievement. And the paper that spoke against me, next day wrote in favor. So this is all how you manage.
Yeah.
So Max Clifford came and he managed the media. The media spoke in my favor. We had the debate. We won the first round also.
So you started even debating in England through telecasting.
Yeah. So that was this. Anyway, and I didn't want to go because, fine, my channel is there, everything is there.
After 3 years, were you allowed to go back?
No. Technically I can, but they have to give me visa.
Today you have to apply if you wanted to go.
But they say no, the band is yet continuing. But of course, technically it's not continuing. It was for 3 years. But anyhow, I don't want to go because now it's more risky for me. Today I don't travel in any country until I get an invitation from the head of state. Even Muslim country, because my Prime Minister Modi is very powerful. So if I don't get invitation from head of state, I don't travel. And today I've got invitation.
We will come to
that later on.
yeah.
Later on, sure.
Okay, so in 20 and we're trying to in 20.
We are lucky that this time was booked for my lecture, and that didn't take place. I'm free.
Alhamdulillah. You wanted to give us an hour at the beginning. Okay, so in 20 now there are one incident and there are now 2 more incidents. There is one incident that happened, which is the second incident is really linked to the third more or less. An incident happened in Dhaka in Bangladesh in 2014. There was a terrorist attack.
In 2016.
2016, sorry. 2014 was the BJP.
1st of July.
2016. There was a 1st of July 2016. There was a terrorist organized bombing in Dhaka in Bangladesh. And you had absolutely nothing to do with it, yet the media was turned against you for some reason. What was that reason, and how did that affect you?
In this terrorist attack in Dhaka, in one of the cafes, there were about 21 foreigners, 2 arrests who were killed. And there were two or three terrorists, and one terrorist happened to be my follower on the Facebook. And that time my Facebook had 14 million followers. So a newspaper in Bangladesh, I think the Star, gave an article that one of the terrorists is following Dr. Zakir Naik on the Facebook. This happened in the 1st of January. The 1st of January, the attack came. Because 1st January late night, the newspaper of 2nd could not publish it. It came in the newspaper on 3rd of January. 3rd of June.
3rd of June, okay.
So 1st June, the attack took place in the night. 2nd June, the paper could not publish it, but maybe the media did. But 3rd June, it came in the newspaper. In the Star. Then on the 4th of June, all the newspapers, all the newspapers, more than 50 in India, started blaming me. Dr. Zakir Naik inspired the terrorist in Bangladesh to kill the 21 foreigners.
Did you say something that was it based on because he followed you, or was it based on you said something?
The newspaper said he was just a follower on my Facebook. That's it. But the newspaper added their own. So much so that 3-4 days later, that same newspaper clarified. We never said Dr. Zakir Naik inspired. We only said that the terrorist was following Dr. Zakir Naik on the Facebook fan page.
But it's too late now.
No, purposely the media does. Who bothers about that? When they get one statement, what comes after 3 days, who's bothered? Correct?
Yeah.
So the Indian media knew very well. They were waiting for an opportunity. Everything was planned.
They were waiting for an opportunity.
Opportunity to attack me.
Why?
Because of my popularity. They wanted to make me... Because BJP came to power in 2014.
Yes.
Same thing like UK.
So what is, for the listener, who are the BJP?
Okay. India has been ruled by Congress for a long period of time. They came, opposition came, but from independence, right from Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister, then it came, then somebody else came, then the daughter came, and up and down, but they have been mainly ruling. So Congress has been one of the major party ruling. And I wouldn't say they're pro-Muslims. I wouldn't say that. But as a vote bank, to the Muslims feel they're pro. I don't think so they're pro. But they're not as bad as the BJP. So I wouldn't say they're pro-Muslims, but they give an impression to the Muslim that they're for Muslims. So most of the Muslims supported Congress. Now in 2014, because of the campaign of BJP, that's another party. That's a Hindu fundamentalist extremist party. And they hardly had, many years back, only 2 seats in the parliament. They get the majority seats. And the Prime Minister becomes Modi, Narendra Modi, who was first the Chief Minister of Gujarat. And he became the Chief Minister of Gujarat, then there were riots there. And more than 5,000, the media says 2,000, but 5 to 10,000 Muslims were killed in Gujarat. Many of the thousands of Muslim ladies were raped. Children were killed. And there was a massacre. It was a state-organized program, killing. So much so that The chief minister of Gujarat at that time, not 2014, when Modi was there, he got banned to enter in UK. Then people filed case against him in USA. He was banned in many countries, including UK and USA.
Why?
Because he was the cause of the killing. So in India, he was innocent. But in UK, he was the culprit for killing of more than 2 to 10,000 Muslims. It was clear. So when they filed a case against him, he could not enter UK. He could not enter. He was the chief minister. Not much power. The irony of this politics is, few years later, he stands as the prime minister. The moment he's declared as prime minister, all the cases against him dropped.
Because he's now immune and diplomatic.
But this is not, no. In that time, he was diplomatic.
Okay, yeah.
Many prime ministers are banned today in many of the foreign countries. So there's no law that prime minister can come to any country. But because they wanted to maintain good relationship with India, because of trade, etc., they removed the ban automatically, which is unethical, inhuman, injustice. A man who was so much protest in UK and USA, the moment he becomes prime minister, khalas, not only is his ban removed, he is invited to the country with red carpet. That's another story. So 2014, he wins the election with the 51% majority, his party, with the coalition about 44, 45, I'm not exactly sure. Then 2019, he again stands for election. I will come back to my case 2016.
Yeah.
In 2019, in his election speech, the speech is long, in 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, I counted 1 minute 58 seconds to be more precise. He used my name 7 times. Only objection is he cannot pronounce my name properly. Zakir, Zakir, Zakir. Tum jante Zakir kaun hai? Do you know who is Zakir Naik? Anyway. So a person, a prime minister of the biggest democratic country in the world at that time. Today he is the biggest populated country in the world. Now today India is overtaking China. In 2019, in less than 2 minutes, in his main speech, he's taking my name 7 times. I'm honored. And even in the second election with more majority. I think it's 54%, with the party 58. This election is going on now. It started in the last week of April. It will continue till the first week of June. It's ongoing now. Before the election starts, they release a movie, Article 370. This is the first time I'm telling someone in the public, because there's new information. Just a couple of months back, before the election came, they released a movie called Article 370, which is talking about Kashmir. And the news in it is fabricated, trying to prove that, Kashmir shouldn't be independent, blah, 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 giving all wrong information to the public. In it, they show a mujahid from Kashmir, the Burhan Wani, and he's killed by the Indian government. There's a protest. Then there's a new mujahid coming by the name of Zakir Naik or Zakir Naiku. So now in the first or the second election, I wasn't there because they were not in power. In second election, when they were in power, they used my name because they had banned me and everything in less than 2 minutes 7 times. In this election, they made a movie. In it, the villain is Zakir Naiku. I think they were afraid to say Zakir Naik, maybe I'll do a case against them. So they said Zakir Naiku. I made a villain. So that means I'm a vote bank. Of course, in between, you may have heard that they sent emissary. Modi sent emissary to meet me, to negotiate with me. We spent more than 5 hours. Why don't you come back? You're very popular. You're really influential. We'll take away all the cases against you.
We will come to the cases. We have to give context to the cases.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So that's another case. But now coming back to the context of Dhaka, they said this, based on this information, there was more than 50 newspapers. In that month, in June, I think it's June or July, we have to check up the dates. It was July 1st or June 1st? 2016.
The 4th of July, all the newspapers
so
reported.
It's not July, correct.
Yeah.
So the attack didn't take on 1st of June, 1st of July. 2016, 1st of July attack took place. The newspaper of Dhaka was 3rd of July. Indian papers started saying in 4th of July, 2016.
Yes.
Therefore I said June or July, but so July it is, okay?
Yeah.
So what happened in the whole month of July, I became the most searched on the internet in India.
Wow.
Maybe world, I'm not sure. but India was.
Yeah.
Because every day on average, 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 papers reporting me. Oh, mashallah. Free publicity. So I became talked about maximum.
What were you going through as a person here?
No,
As a human
first
being,
of all,
they're all
First of all, I
accusing
was shocked.
Yeah.
I never dreamt that I would be accused. Okay, you were talking about hate speech, fine, but being a terrorist. I have given speeches different parts of the world to the police, including India. In Hyderabad, which is a police academy, where I gave them a talk, anti-terrorism there. They invite me. And now today they're accusing me of terrorism. I give a talk in UK, I give a talk in Gulf countries, many countries. I give talk on terrorism, on counter-terrorism, the M5 in UK in 2009, as you told, they want me to help them how to get the terrorists on the straight line. And now they're accusing me of something which is absurd. So I never dreamt of it, but this is it. This is media. So when they started speaking against me, mashallah, mashallah, many Muslims started protesting all over India, which I didn't expect. Even Muslims of different sects, those I said in Urdu, they speak against me, they said we may disagree with Zakir Naik, but he's not a terrorist. So there were protests all over India, so much so that in less than 1 month, on the 2nd of August in 2016, in less than 1 month, 4th July started, in the parliament, it was mentioned that Dr. Zakir Naik is innocent. We don't find any evidence against his organization. After this, all the protests stopped. It was khalas. So this was the strategy. After that, all the protests stopped. There's no protest.
No need for a protest.
No need for a protest because they give a clear chit. But of course, behind the curtain, they were attacking my organization. They were putting all raid on it. We knew that.
In November, they banned your organization.
In November, what happens? In October last week, they wanted to ban the Muslim personal law. So when they wanted to ban the Muslim personal law in the last week of October, all the Muslims gathered. In the first week or second week of November, they devalued the currency of 1,000 rupees. So full India is in turmoil. So one turmoil is that they want to remove the Muslim post. So all the Muslims are there. Second turmoil starts off in the midst of that. On 17th of November, 2016, Modi takes a special cabinet meeting. And in that special cabinet meeting, they ban Islamic Research Foundation. So now, there is no protest. Muslims are busy in other thing, the devaluation of the note. So it was all calculated. They let us calm them down in August, September, October, November, after 3.5 months, they banned. And I was in Dubai.
At the time. Yeah.
At that time. I said, let's fly back. In 2 days, safest country I felt was Malaysia. I go there. And I meet the Deputy Prime Minister, who was the Home Minister. And I knew Malaysia was the country that when all this turmoil was going on, they were the country that officially took a stand for me. Officially.
Stand.
Officially means the Islamic Minister, the Prime Minister, all of them said, no, Zakir is, he's innocent. And of course, Qatar to a certain extent. But first was Malaysia. So I felt that's the safest, so I went there.
Why didn't you go back to India?
Yes, that's a very good thing. Why didn't I go back on 17th?
Yeah.
When all this thing happened, on 4th of July started, I was in Makkah. It was just on Eid day. The 1st of July was Eid. I was in Makkah and the allegation started. So I made a video in Makkah replying to these allegations.
Okay.
And normally my policy is that last 10 days always spend in Makkah. I spend the Eid in Makkah and next day I go to Medina. So then we said, okay, we will have a live press conference in India against this. So I was going to cancel my trip and fly to Bombay. So all my staff were prepared. I said, let's face it, head on. Best is head on. Let's have a press conference. So we hired a big conference room in 5-star hotel to organize it. The police goes to the 5-star hotel and says, cancel it. So we get a letter, sorry, we can't give it. We are another 5-star hotel. All this is happening when the allegation started in July.
Yeah.
Within 1-2 weeks, I said, let's go head on.
Yeah.
I said, khalas, I'll go there and answer directly. Why have a media trial? So we go to 3 venues, all of them cancelled. Then one of my close friends has a very big hall. He said, khalas, I will do it, no problem, do it in my hall. We do it, they go to them and they threaten him. So then finally we do it in our own organization. In our auditorium, which is not very big, but can take at least a couple of 100 people.
Okay.
And I then take it from Medina.
You take it from Medina.
Yes, because they're cancelling everything, they aren't allowing. So we said, okay, fine. If that is the case, we'll do a live. And that was a normally press conference of half an hour, 1 or 2 hours. That went on for 4 hours.
So you took it from Medina?
Medina live.
Okay.
From Medina, I answered all the allegations. I made a video and I gave it to the press and I took a live Q&A.
Okay.
Live conference from Medina. On the big screen I was there. And, we were prepared. We said, okay. And the government saw to it. They did many things, but they could not stop it for inauguration because, we were the main people. So we did a live press conference for about 4 to 5 hours.
Okay.
Only there was a gap for the Salah.
Fair
one
enough.
of the Salah.
Why didn't you go back to India?
Because then my lawyer said that if you come now, they may arrest you.
For
the allegation.
For the allegation?
Yes, fine.
Because of because of the
Someone
allegation?
yes.
Because you inspired,
Right.
you didn't even, because someone who followed you and bombed a...
Someone of the follower doesn't make sense. Not my follower, they're good, bad and ugly. There are many presidents following, prime ministers.
Yeah, you don't have to explain this. It's logical. It's very easy. But
then the reason is because in India, many people have been arrested in the past. And the case goes on for 15 years and they get released without any charges after 15 years. So then we realized that now the government is after me. What happened actually? We did not go. So they raided the organization. They did many things, blah, blah, blah. So the NIA is known as the National Investigation Agency. They came and they raided my organization after a few days of the ban. I said, no problem. They took all the expensive cameras. We didn't touch on that we bought film cameras, the most expensive film cameras. Each camera costing $1 million, about 100,000 KD each camera. So we had 18 cameras. Yeah. And we shifted it outside for safety and they went and they took it. They have no right to take it.
So they confiscated everything?
They can confiscate the hard disk, no problem, allowed by law. They can take the computer, the hard disk, but they can't take the cameras by law.
They can take only the information that it holds?
They can take information, they can take papers, but they can't take camera. What will they get by taking lens? Will they get some information from the lens? No. So they took it. My lawyer said, you file in 1 week. In 1 week, you'll get the cameras back if you file a case. The moment we went to file, the police threatened. My people were scared. They could not. So the cameras are yet in their custody from 2016 till now for 8 years. Not 8 years, 7.5. 8 years will be after a few months in November. 7.5 years. The most expensive cameras in the world. No one in the world had 18 film cameras together. So this is, this shows that, how much they're afraid of the population. So then my lawyer said that if you come, they will surely arrest you. We will free you. May take 10 years, may take 15 years, may take 20 years. So we learn from the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad that best is to do hijrah. So we learn from the seerah of the Prophet that when the atrocities, when people are against you, the best is to hijrah.
Yes.
So we were already out. So Zakir ran away is wrong. I was already out. And I'm an NRI, I mean non-resident Indian. By law, I stay more than 6 months outside India so that I'm not taxable. So I had Aqama of Dubai, I had Aqama of Saudi. So normally I stay more than 6 months. So normally I was supposed to go to Medina and come back. Later, I was willing to come early to give the press conference. They stopped it. And then my lawyer advised that, now the hell bent on you. If you come now, they'll arrest you. And by the time you prove yourself, it may take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So best is you don't come.
So you went to Malaysia?
No, when this thing got banned, then I went to Malaysia. First I was in Malaysia afterwards.
After all?
After the ban. The ban was in November, so the difference.
Yeah.
The news started in July.
Yeah.
July 4th, the news started. I was in Makkah. I went to Medina. After a few days, the press conference took place. Then I was supposed to go back to India and then fly to Gambia. I was invited to Gambia by the president of Gambia. So I extended my stay in Saudi for a few days. Instead of going to Bombay and then go to Gambia, I went to Gambia directly. And my crew flew from Bombay to shoot the event. Normally when we travel, we had 55 crew. So 55 people flew with the equipment from Bombay and my family flew from Saudi to Gambia.
Before the ban?
I think we went to Dubai for 1 month, if I'm correct.
And then
so 1 month we were in Dubai, then we went to Gambia.
And then Dubai, Gambia, the ban happened in November, you went to Malaysia.
So when I went to Dubai for 1 month, then went to Gambia, then I did another lecture tour, then I was in Dubai, I was traveling, I normally travel, but I didn't go back. I was supposed to go back for a few days and fly out.
Yeah.
That few days I did not go back. Then when this ban took place, I was in Dubai. That's in 17th of November. In the evening, we heard that the ban took place. Within a couple of days, I think 19th, we flew to Malaysia. We didn't know how long will it take for them to come and request. No, but of course, the foreign request came later on. But we wanted to be safe because we knew Alhamdulillah, there are many politicians all over the world that know. But we felt Malaysia was the safe, so we went back to Malaysia. And fortunately, we already had the PR of Malaysia. So I had the Iqama of Dubai already, Iqama of Saudi, and the permanent residency of Malaysia.
Yeah.
Because they gave me in my previous trip in April 2016.
So you already had the
PR, so I could stay there. So
you had the permanent residency already.
Not knowing that this happened.
You're not knowing, but when you reached Malaysia, something happened there in between 2017 and 2019. India tried to request an Interpol for three main reasons. The first one was for you being a terrorist.
That's in 2017.
And then?
So approximately 10 months after the event. 10 months after the event, maybe 6 months after the ban, they requested the Interpol. So there was one of my fans in Qatar who called a very famous lawyer to protect me. So he came from UK, Peter Benning, very famous lawyer. And he charged £50,000 to speak to me for 2 hours.
Okay.
And he told me that, Dr. Naik, when a government requests on charges of terrorism, 99% the Interpol will issue a RCN, red corner notice. Without proof also, because government is requesting. Terrorism is a very sensitive issue. So I said, why have you come here then? If 99.9% I'm going to be issued, the Interpol is going to issue a red corner, why are you here? No, we can delay it. How long? Maybe a month. So I said, coming here charging £50,000 to delay the Interpol notice for 1 month. I was and I'm like my usual style, the ripping off, Anyway, but as I told you that officially Malaysia, mashallah, sent their representative. And maybe they thought that, they might have Googled and who's Dr. Zakir Naik, and they might have seen my videos, and that's what I feel. Interpol refused. When they requested in 2017, Interpol refused. It takes 2-3 months for them to reply. And they said that there is no proof at all. There is no charge sheet. There is no charge sheet from your side. How can you say that he's involved in terrorism? And the point to be noted is, in the Bangladesh charge sheet, my name is not mentioned only. In Bangladesh, when the terrorists were charged.
Yeah, your name was not mentioned.
Not mentioned.
So you're not...
In Bangladesh, I'm not charged. How can I be charged in India? So it's foolish. So they are making a mockery of law. Yeah. And they know it. So in Bangladesh, so my lawyers found out, in Bangladesh, where the terrorists were charged, my name is not there. They are charging me in India for Bangladesh. It is foolish. So they're making a fool of the people.
So they went and they did another type of
no. So they
request.
Said there is nothing, and so they neglected. After 2 years, they again filed for an RCN, means red corner notice, but now the charges are different. There's no charge of terrorism. Okay. Now they're saying hate speech.
Did something happen between 2017 and 2019 that you said that might have been interpreted as hate speech? And
No. All these old lectures of mine. All lectures.
But why were they still targeting you? Now
because they know that for terrorism they have no proof.
So they're still after you.
So they put another charge.
Okay.
They put a charge on hate
speech. Okay.
Hate speech charge and giving references and all. So they said this is all political. And they refused in 2019 again. 2021 again, they changed the charges to
money laundering,
which is very easy. He's collecting funds everywhere and money laundering. So they said, and they wrote a very strong letter. And it's there with me. That Dr. Zakir Naik has not broken any law of any country in collecting funds. If he collects, he does it with law and he has the right to collect. If he has an organization in UK, he can collect in UK. If he has the right, there is no evidence of money laundering. All this is political. After that, so far, they haven't applied the 4th time. So they were insulted thrice. And every time, wherever I go, they follow me. So they requested Malaysia many times, hand over Dr. Zakir. So much so that in 2018, when Dr. Mahathir was the Prime Minister, Modi went to the extent of saying that if you don't hand over Dr. Zakir, we'll stop trade. And Malaysia has $11 billion trade.
So it's to that point, huh?
That point, yes. And mother said, go ahead. And of course there were other issues also. There was the issue of even Kashmir, that Mahathir Mohamad had protected Kashmir against the wrong thing that they did. And that's when even they sent a person to me.
That was 2019, right? They sent.
Yes,
Yeah.
they sent
What
someone
happened?
to
So who? I mean, what type of person came to you?
I received a person and I asked him, who is he? I won't take his name. So he said, I've been sent directly. I said, who has sent you? He said, Modi and Amit Shah. Amit Shah is the Home Minister and the right-hand man of Modi both. I've been sent by Modi and Amit Shah to meet you. And we want to clarify the misconception between the Indian government and yourself. I said, if anyone knows me, after my family, anyone knows me very well, is the Indian government. Though they know me in and out. So there's no misconception. What's the misconception? What do you want to know? You know me in and out. The NI, the intelligence of India is very strong. The intelligence of Bombay is number 2 in the world after Scotland Yard. There's no misconception. It's only politics, I said. I said, what do you want to tell me? No, we want to know you're very influential. Let's get together. We'll make a passage for you very clear. You can come back to Bombay and we'll support you. We'll fund you, blah, 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 blah. I said, what do you want to tell me? Then I realized that they wanted me to support the action in Kashmir. They wanted to take the autonomy of Kashmir again, and they wanted to support them. I said, oh, my dead body, you cannot do that. I said, I will support you as long as you don't tell me to do anything against Quran and Sunnah, and I don't want your money. Then they told me that when they took the NEC Act, the national, the act of removing anyone who doesn't have documents will be removed from the citizenship, and Hindus, Christians and Parsis will get citizenship, Muslims will not get. And they wanted me to support. I said, I cannot. So in this time also, Mahathir also supported and spoke against India in the UN about the issue of Kashmir, and my issue was there. So at that time, Modi told, okay, we'll stop trade. And Mahathir, mashallah, he's strong. He cannot be bullied. He said, go ahead, stop. And they stopped for 8 months.
They did stop for 8 months.
8 months, yes. They restarted, and I think after that, Mahathir may have increased the rate of palm oil and other things. So he's strong. So the thing is, wherever I go, they keep on following. And alhamdulillah, I have had no problems because most of the countries I go, I always take permission from the head of state. Head of the country, then I go to be safe.
So it is political at this point, isn't it?
It's very highly.
What is happening? Why? And maybe that brings me to the last point that I would like to discuss with you, and it's about how Muslims are being treated. And I asked you before how Muslims were treated growing up, and now I want to see after the BJP came into power in 2014 and then 2016 Modi as Prime Minister. How did anything change in terms of how Muslims are being treated in India? And also, honestly, is this how can you tell me what you're about to tell me without being biased, because you're also being they're coming after you at the same time. But here I want to speak about specifically the Muslims in India.
To tell you frankly, as far as the Muslims are concerned, before BJP government came to power, if you had asked me this question in 2013, that which are the best 10 countries for a Muslim to live in, India would be one of them. Whether you want to place India number 8, number 9, that's your choice. But it would surely be one of the top 10 countries where a Muslim should settle. Of course, Quran is very clear that Muslims should settle in a Muslim majority country. But India is an exception, if you know history of India. That India was ruled by the Muslims for over 1,000 years. The Mughals came, though they were not in majority, but they were approximately, you could say at that time, close to 30% or whatever it is. Or maybe 40%. And Dalits were there, maybe Muslims were 40% at that time, you could say, of the whole population. But we ruled India for 1,000 years. When the Britishers came, they divided India and divided the Muslims of India into 3 parts. 1/3 went to Pakistan, 1/3 Bangladesh, 1/3 remained. Approximately. Of course, more remain in India. The number of Muslims in India are much more than the number of Muslims in Pakistan or Bangladesh. But the government claims that we are 14.3%, about 205 million, but practically we are more than 20-25%, more than 300 million. But that's besides the point. So whether we are the largest country in the world today, more than Indonesia. Indonesia has 229 million Muslims, so we have about 300. If you take it technically, then we are number 2. What the government claims, the number 3 after Pakistan. But coming back to the point, if you had asked me this question in 2013, I would say India is one of the best countries in the top 10. Some may rate it number 7, some may 8, some may 9, but you cannot go less than. Better than many of the Muslim countries in the world for a Muslim to live. Why? Because Muslims are allowed to follow the Muslim personal law. That means except that we can follow the Sharia. If you want to marry more than one wife, you can marry. Inheritance, even if they write in their deed that give all my wealth to the son, but you have to follow the Sharia. He cannot do that. In marriage, in inheritance, everything, except the criminal law is common. There are few countries which have Muslim personal law, but they don't practice it. So amongst the non-Muslim countries, the best country was India. India was better than many Muslim countries. When BJP came with the hate, with the hatred, etc., of course, the things changed in India.
Yeah.
Certain things, should I say or not, is I don't know. But anyway, the things have changed. So you could say that India had deteriorated maybe 10 times, 20 times.
Polarized, you would say?
Polarized, yes. On average, I would say that, before BJP came to power, I would say that majority of the Hindus were good to the Muslims. Majority. I would say roughly majority were good. Some were neutral and enemies were very few. Let's put 5%. Some may say 5, some may say 10, can't be more than that. And you could say 60% were very cordial with Muslims, 30% neutral, not cordial, but no problem. Neutral is no problem. So maybe 5% were against.
Just like any other...
Not like any other, better than any other.
I mean, just like any other society, you'll have a little percentage.
No.
Of people.
Other society, I would say, against Muslim maybe 20%. In favor, maybe 20%. Neutral, maybe 60%.
Okay, so it isn't better than others.
And much better than most of the non-Muslim countries in the world.
Okay.
For you to find a non-Muslim country better than India would be difficult.
Okay.
Difficult. So I would say majority means whether it is 60%, 55%, were good with Muslims. Others were neutral, enemies were 5%. When they started polarizing, the enemies increased, the people in favor decreased, and the neutral also increased. So when we had 30% neutral, the neutral became maybe 50% or 60% neutral. In favor became 10%, enemies became 20, 30%.
Yeah.
And as time is going on, the enemies are increasing, but yet they're not in majority, even today. They may be in a minority, whether it's 15%, 20%, but those which were in favor started decreasing. So the enemies may have increased to 20%, the neutral may have increased to 75%, favor maybe 5%. That's what happened. So now the situation of India, yet you're seeing in the world, what I'm going to say is going to be something different, but since you asked me to speak the truth, I'll say something which many people have come to me for advice, yet the Indians come out for advice to me. Today, India has deteriorated maybe 20 times, 30 times. Yet, it is better than many countries of the world. Yet. This statement, maybe Modi will be happy. But let me clarify one thing. I am talking about today, India, more than 50% of India, as far as the states are concerned, is not controlled by Modi. So South India is yet safe. Hyderabad, Andhra Pradesh, safe. West Bengal, very safe. Percentage-wise, I don't know exactly, but more than 50% of India is yet safe because they aren't ruled by the BJP local. BJP is ruling the country, but state-wise, they're ruling maybe little less than 50%. So the South India is safe. Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, safe. Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad, West Bengal, very safe.
Yes.
So if you live here, yet it is not as good as before BJP, but close to it. You understand?
Yeah.
The problem is in the balance, 50% or 40% of India. In the other balance, half the states are hardcore BJP, which is creating problems for Muslims. And the other is not hardcore, but problems have increased. So I tell the people, you migrate to the 50% of India which is safe.
Migrate,
why not? You can't migrate outside India. Where will 300 million Muslims go?
I mean, migration,
Into
you
India,
have to be really bullied to be able to migrate. So you would say that
migrating in India is easier than migrating outside.
for sure, but for you to move from one place to another, you have to be really bullied for you to be able to go from one place. So is it to
Not
that point?
Not bullied. If you think living is difficult and dangerous, then
Is
don't
it
some places yes, some places yes.
Okay.
So I would say that why? Because the full world situation has deteriorated. There's Islamophobia everywhere. There's problem in Muslim countries itself.
on
There's problem in
Islamophobia?
Syria, in Yemen, in Palestine, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. It's bad.
It is, yeah.
So yet those states in India which are not ruled by BJP is multiple times better than most of the Muslim countries in the world. Be very frank to you. You can yet do dawah there. And there are people doing dawah. You can do dawah more free in India than most of the Muslim countries in the world. Do you know that? Yet, but of course, these states I'm talking about are the states which are not ruled by BJP. I'm telling you something which I should not speak.
Yeah. So this is why I'm not sure where.
But I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
I don't mind. I'm
Sure,
sure. And this may be advice to my Indian brothers and sisters that yet India is better than many of the Muslim countries, leave aside the non-Muslim countries. It's better than the Western countries. So if you have a problem in the state, if you're living in a state which is controlled by the BJP, you migrate to a state like Kerala, migrate to Karnataka, migrate to Tamil Nadu, migrate to Andhra Pradesh, migrate to Telangana, migrate to West Bengal. Now this is half of India. And some states, the other half, some half like UP is bad. But again, UP has some pockets which are safe. So everything depends upon the situation where you are. So if you feel it's difficult to practice your deen, Quran says migrate.
So,
But you don't have to migrate outside India, which will be difficult. Who will give you citizenship?
correct.
Fine, we are lucky. Allah has blessed us that many countries have offered us. So the thing is that we are on a different platform. For me, it's different. I have been hounded, so I cannot go and live in Kerala. I cannot.
Yeah.
They'll catch me there also. So I cannot do that because it's the central government. The allegations are there. Unless the government changes, for me to go back, I can go back, but I can't come out.
Yes.
So I'm on a different situation. I'm on a different platform. I'm doing what I can do from India. I'm doing dawah. So my dawah has increased. There are more Indians now following me than before. My Facebook following in India has increased multiple times. My YouTube has increased multiple times. They tried to ban me whatever they could. But my dawah in India has increased multiple times. I may not be physically present, but through the social media and through the other platforms. So, yet we are doing dawah. We have moved to a different stage and different level. So, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Nira, how much do you have on this left? 5 minutes? 10. Okay, so I don't want to finish it till the end. For the. Okay. If I were to finish with a question, I want to go back to the boy from India that we spoke about. That the boy from Bombay.
Oh, the boy.
You haven't been to Bombay now for how many years?
I left Bombay in May 2016.
Yeah.
Maybe close to 15, 16. So I've left for about 8 years now. 8 years and maybe a few days.
Yeah.
8 years and a week, approximately, if you want to count till today.
Do you miss Bombay?
Of course I miss Bombay.
Do you think that you'll be going back one day to Bombay?
If Allah wills, Allah allows me, why not? Going back is easy, but I should be able to come out when
Yes,
I want.
but I
I
mean,
can
go
do
on.
dawah. Of course. Going is very easy. They'll give me a red carpet treatment if I go there. No one will stop me from going to India. But can I do my work? Can I be free? So I can go back. But when I think that that's what many people told me, I may agree or disagree with them, that one of the very famous, I won't take his name, he said, you are the first person who has done hijrah for dawah. I don't agree with him, but that's what he said.
Yeah.
You have done the sunnah of the Prophet did hijrah. And now we're waiting for Fateh Makkah. When the Prophet did hijrah from Makkah to Medina, the Fateh, inshallah, if Allah wants, we'll come back.
Inshallah, you go back.
And do Fateh Bombay and Fateh India, inshallah.
Inshallah. But if there is one loophole that we didn't close, is how you got over of being a stammer, or how, did you just evaporate, or did you work on it? Because it's a psychological block. Did you work on it?
Yes, so as I would say that, my stammering, as I kept on giving more and more speeches, my stammering on the stage decreased, but in the real life also started decreasing.
Okay.
To tell you frankly, has it disappeared? 100% no. Not on the stage, not. But I know how to overcome it.
Okay.
So when it comes, I know how to overcome it. I say something else and it overcomes. So it's easy now.
You know how to organize it at least or manage it.
But natural. On the stage, maybe it will be maybe 1%. In my real life, it may be about 2-3%. That's it. But it's there. Tell you frankly. So on the stage, maybe 1% will get there, and I know how to overcome it. So they don't come to an standard. But on the real life, maybe it's 3-4%. It's more percentage more in real life. So it's not 100% gone. But alhamdulillah, the benefit of the other things of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is much more.
Alhamdulillah. Sheikh ذاكر Abu Faraq, thank you for coming to بدون ورق.
It's my pleasure.
Hope to see you again in Kuwait.
Inshallah.
Pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
It's my pleasure too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mira.